Just a bloke in a bar.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of Bloke in a Bar, brought to you by Bloke in a Bar as usual. The beer of summer, the beer of sport. We've also got our main man, Guru, who unfortunately, he's a bit crook at the moment. How you feeling, big dog?
Mate, I've been better. Fingers crossed we get a negative test back over the next few days, but thought we'd play some smart footy and go Zoom. It's a bit weird going back to it just quietly.
Yeah, I mean, it was weird that Zoom, I didn't even know what Zoom was before 2020. And now it's like part of our lexicon as a society is like, I'll just Zoom you. It used to be like Skype. You know what I mean? It's crazy how things change. Crazy. But anyway, hopefully the big fella is all good. If not, I mean, we're all bound to get it eventually. Fuck, we can't avoid it. But we've got our 12 stores. Beautiful beers to pick up at these 12 stores. We've got Loca Liquor, Piermont, Porter's Liquor Glebe, Tats Hotel, Inverell, Norris Park IGA, Mo Bottle Mart Victoria, Norfolk Island Liquor Bond, Yandina Hotel, on tap. It's on tap at Yandina Hotel in Sunny Coast, Central Tavern Caloundra West, Liquor Legends Forest Hill, Beach House Hotel Hervey Bay, Hotel Stradbroke, Yamba Liquor, and I think Britannia in Sunshine Coast. I actually popped in there. I think it's called Britannia. I could be wrong. But I popped in there and I actually bought a case of my own beer from that store. A lovely lady at the counter that served me, so thank you very much for that. Britannia in Sunshine Coast. And also, speaking of not feeling the best, the big fella, Frank Pritchard, unfortunately went to hospital. I was going to put a post up, but these things are so sensitive. I don't know. You don't know whether they would want it up or they wouldn't want it up, but it seems to have hit mainstream media. Went to hospital with some complications from COVID. From what we're being told from Gus, he's out of hospital now. Still not in the best condition, but he's out of hospital. So just want to send our best wishes out to Frank Pritchard. I mean, you know, it's really scary when you see that. Like you almost to imagine a guy like Frank Pritchard. We all grew up, absolutely loved watching him play with his massive offloads, his edge running. To think that such a man mountain could be hit so hard it's scary. It's kind of brings everything back into focus. So sending our absolute best wishes to the big fella. We hope you get better, and I'm sure he'll make a full recovery. So, but now, what we wanted to do today is we wanted to go through the top 10 moments. So we've got Matty to put his top 10 moments together. We got the great Guru to put his 10 best moments together from 2021. And what I love about this is it seems a bit cliche, you know, let's put the top 10 moments together, and everyone does that at the end of the year. But in a podcast form, it's actually really interesting I want to go back and talk about it, because when things happen in the moment, sometimes you can have a different feel of how big it is or what happened. Once you get a bit away from it and the dust settles, your opinion can change on what has happened. So first of all, we'll start at number 10. Matty's number 10 moment was Ryan.
Oh, for sure, mate. There's a couple here that I...
Sorry, you there?
Yeah, you there?
Yeah. Start at 10 for the great Guru.
Yeah, so number 10, we had Pappy scores 4 tries. Now, against this game against Brisbane, it was 6-0 in the 25th minute. At halftime, it was 24-6. Pappy scored all 24 points. Of course, he's the goal kicker for the Melbourne Storm as well. So, mate, just unbelievable. And for those Supercoach players out there, you know, Brisbane wasn't travelling overly well. Everyone thought Pappy was going to explode, and good God, there were some nervous people out there in that 25th minute, and then all of a sudden he just went berserk. You know, his support play, Ryan Pappenhausen, is just sensational, and it really did show. You know, his absolute best footy that night. He's a freak little Pappy. Yeah,
absolutely, man. I mean, he was showing what he does best. You know what I mean? He's one of the best outside of Tedesco. I would say Tedesco is probably the best. I mean, we've got Tom Trbojevic now. But I'd still put Tedesco up as the best support player, but Ryan Pappenhausen, he's a close second. I think it was also a real, I guess, wake-up call for the Broncos as well. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong, how many wake-up calls do the Broncos need? But it was also just a good example. It really drove home how far away the Broncos were from where they need to be a competitive side in the NRL. For them to have 4 tries put on like that and then go from 24 to 6, from 6-0 up, it was a real, like, a kind of kick in the guts of like, guys, this is just not good. That is not good enough in NRL.
Mate, I remember this night in about the 20th minute, I I put up a post saying Craig Bellamy's going to lose his mind at halftime, and then, mate, within 10 minutes, I almost felt like deleting the thing. I was like, you look like an absolute muppet now. They're up by 18 all of a sudden. And, as you said, mate, in the 20th minute, I was thinking, good God, Brisbane is doing well to hang in here. This is so impressive. And it went from being Brisbane is so impressive to 10 minutes later going, fuck, we're getting the same old Brisbane here. It was an unreal night. It was crazy.
You know what it was is speaking to my brother's father-in-law, and he made a really good, I guess, we weren't talking about the Broncos versus Storm specifically, but we were talking about the difference in standard between first grade and reserve grade. And the difference really is that in reserve grade, you can get 20 minutes of first grade standard footy, but that's about it. And I think, and this is no disrespect to the Broncos players, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, they're all just a bunch of reserve graders. It's more just because they're so young that a lot of those players probably would have spent an extra year or two in reserve grade before they made their first grade debut. Now, again, to be clear, this may pay massive dividends in the future, where for the next 10 years we've got these hardened, young fellas that are just guns. But I think it really did show that the standard difference was pretty much first grade and reserve grade that night.
I think it genuinely is one of the more underappreciated things by people that, obviously you go and watch your park football and you can see the gap, but mate, the gap between reserve grade and first grade is massive as well. And I think it's something that people really do underappreciate. Yeah,
absolutely. Because to be honest, like, you could take the top four Q Cup sides, and they could maybe hang with a few NRL teams for the first 20 to 30 minutes. But after that, they just get blown off the park. And again, it's because they're inexperienced, it's because they're not training full-time, all that kind of stuff. But I just thought that night with the Storm, we really saw the cream of the crop against a team that is still developing, is still in the phase of, a few of these boys in a perfect world would be playing Q Cup, would be, really, I guess, sharpening their tools in Q Cup. So, yeah, that was a crazy night. To see that all unfold was absolutely, to see Pappy. Did he come back from injury again that night, or was that just before Magic Round when he got his head knock?
I'm pretty sure that was before the head knock and everything. I'm pretty sure that this was reasonably early in the season. But, to me, it also just showed that in the NRL, if you clock off for 3 minutes, you can lose an 80-minute game of football.
Yep.
It can just go straight away, especially if you're playing one of these top-tier sides. If you're not playing the full 80, you can get yourself into some serious barney very quickly.
Absolutely. And when you're a young side like the Broncos are, like, clawing back is a very hard thing to do. Once you get broken like that. And I think another thing as well I guess I'm being pretty biased because I'm talking from the Broncos perspective, is I feel like the Broncos team at the start of the season would allow that to happen. I think by the end of the season, the Broncos wouldn't have allowed that to happen. I think we actually would have found, like, Storm would have still won, but I think it would have been quite a close encounter because the maturity that, when you take that one game of that just absolute lapse in judgment for 10 minutes, I don't see that as bad. Like, I don't see them doing that by round 24. I saw them as a team that still wasn't where they needed to be, but they had some fight in them. They had some real gall. Like, I mean, they were taking Penrith Panthers to the wire. They were taking the Roosters to the wire. By the end of the season. Again, we need to be better than just taking teams to the wire, but it's still an improvement as to where we were at the start of the year.
And now you throw in an Adam Reynolds into the piece but for me, the best thing about Adam Reynolds is that he'll be the guy that talks behind the goalpost.
Yeah.
Once Pappy scored his second try, there was a moment there where it could have gone either way. Unfortunately, it went the wrong way for Brisbane, but having a guy like Reynolds now who can just get you to where you need to be, get you to your kick, and just start to get back in the grind, it's going to be massive for them, mate. Yourself and Broncos fans, based on what you saw at the end of this last season, and based on the guys that have walked in there, it's exciting times, mate.
Oh, absolutely. And you're totally right with Reynolds, like behind the goalpost, but also, behind the goalpost in saying, let's say they score those 2 tries, Reynolds will be going, okay, everyone shut the fuck up. You follow me now. I'm going to take control of this team. And he would literally just go, hit up, kick. Boys, we're defending a set for our lives. This next set is for our lives. Whereas before, we didn't really have an older player that had the experience to be able to go, everyone shut up. This is what we're doing. And let's all buy in. So you're totally right. I think if you had a Reynolds and a Catewell in that Broncos side in that moment where Pappy has just torn us apart, I think that we probably leaked 2 tries, and then after that we glue everything together. Reynolds slows the pace of the game down, gets the ball out, so that we can regather ourselves. Whereas, when you look at that game when Pappy scored 4 tries, we didn't have a guy experienced enough to go, what do we need to do here? We need to upset their rhythm. We need to get them stopped. Let's stop the game. Kick the fucking ball dead if we have to. Kick it out. Let's just stop the games instead of this getting in the... We don't want to get into this flow with them because clearly their flow is at a higher flow state than us.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really excited for Brisbane heading into next year, mate. I think that the potential is just sky high there. Keep coming back to Adam Reynolds, but I just think he's going to be so good for them and such a great signing. You scored 4 tries yourself one day, didn't you?
Yes, I did actually. That's why I kept talking about this, because I just wanted to get this point. No, that's a joke. I didn't actually put this as 10. This is Matty's 10. So it's the best day ever because, like, scoring tries, especially as a winger, you just know your job's done. You did your job. It's just, you can't explain it. It's just so good because every time you score another try, you're thinking, how can this get better? This is sick. How good is, you know what I mean? It just keeps working for you. Pappenhuisen. It was interesting as well as at that time, people genuinely, and that's why I like talking about top 10 moments from earlier in the year. It's going to sound crazy, but at that time, there were some people saying, should Pappenhausen have the New South Wales number 1 role? And anyone that denies that is fucking talking shit, because I was saying that is crazy. Pappenhuisen is being really good, but there's no one taking that role from Teddy. Do you also remember that chat? Some people, not everyone, there were some people.
Games before this, he won a Clive Churchill medal, so he was putting himself right in the box seat, Pappy. I think if it wasn't for the head knocks and whatnot, I think he locks himself into the 14 jersey for New South Wales at minimum, realistically. It's a bit unfortunate how it's played out for Pappy and probably Victor Radley as well. I think they've both been very unlucky not to debut yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sorry, you just cut out at the start there. Were people also saying to you that, Pappy might take Tedesco's spot?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It was a real thing out there. People were getting proper keen on him. I think, obviously, Turbo, I don't think he'd started playing yet. I think he was out for the first few weeks. And Teddy was playing 8 out of 10, which, unfortunately, we expect 9 and 10 out of 10 for Teddy. So, I mean, if Pappy was playing the games that Teddy was playing at the start of the year, we'd still be incredibly impressed. But Teddy just sets such a high standard for himself. It's almost unfair on him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, Teddy is a victim of his own consistency. We are so used to Teddy playing, but like he's having year after year, all-time years. Like he's had 4 years in a row where you could match that up against the greatest, outside of Tom Trbojevic, because obviously that's an outlier. But if you matched up those 4 years against Billy Slater's best 4 years, they may not be better, but I'll tell you what, they would be... You wouldn't be crazy to match them up. Do you know what I mean? His last 4 years against Billy Slater's best year would be very similar, very similar.
Mate, Teddy holds up. And, mate, you even go back to when Teddy was at the Tigers, mate, his form there was incredible. And he came to the Roosters. Took him 2 or 3 months to sort of find his feet. But once he did, mate, he hasn't looked back. And, I said, like, I don't think he's played under an 8 out of 10 in 4 years now. He is just incredible.
I would agree. I would honestly, I truly believe that you could take his last 3 or 4 years and compare it against any of the best fullbacks. And I'm not saying that they would be better, but it would truly, it's a good argument. Like it's a very, you could, I mean, because not only has he been incredible at club level, but every time he plays for New South Wales, he plays 8 to 9 out of 10. Even this year, he was incredible, but it was just the fact that Latrell and Tom Trbojevic were godly in the way they played. That was real. I was always of the mind, like, don't get me wrong, Pappenhuisen was incredible, and I think that I agree with you. I do believe that if he doesn't get injured, he gets that 14 role. But at no point did I feel that Tedesco should have would have ever lost his position to Pappenhuisen. I think that Tedesco has played so well for so long that he actually could play for a busted for a whole year, for half a year. Like I'm talking, Teddy could come out for me if I'm New South Wales, give me 6 out of 10s every week, and I would still pick him at fullback over Tom Trbojevic, over Ryan Papenhuyzen, because A, he's delivered so many times, but B, what kind of message does that send culture-wise that a guy that has delivered you series after series wins, you're just going to get rid of him because he had 3 months of bad footy? What are your thoughts on that? Let's say Teddy rolls out next year, 2022. He gives you 3 months of he gives you 10 weeks of 6 out of 10s.
He's my captain. He's my automatic captain. There's no doubt about it. He's my automatic fullback for the Anzac Test. I'm just thinking off the top of my head now. Kangaroos haven't played since Boyd Cordner retired. Teddy's my Kangaroos captain.
Yeah.
I mean, the other option would be DCE, but I think Cleary's probably going to wear the 7 now, realistically. I'm not sure if DCE's in the side. So, for me, mate, I reckon Teddy retires with the 1 jersey in every team he plays in. He hands it over when he's ready to hand it over, especially with the way that you can use these fullbacks in other positions now. So many of them are playing centre, 14, wherever it might be. So I don't think it matters how poorly he goes, and I'm so confident he won't go poorly, as I'm sure you are as well. But I just can't see him losing a jersey in any football team that he can possibly be picked in realistically.
Okay, here's a tougher one for you. So Teddy's not going to lose that 1 position. Isaiah is definitely not losing that 13 position. Who gets the 14 role, Pappy or Radley?
I love Victor Radley. I absolutely love him, and I think it's criminal he hasn't played yet. But I think that if I was picking a 14, I think I would go with Pappy.
Really?
Yeah, only because I think that if you're going to have – this is the problem. I think that Isaiah Yeo is so good, and his combo with Nathan Cleary is so good you can't leave him out. And I think that if you're going to have Cam Murray in your side somewhere, if Isaiah Yeo's at 13, you assume he's going to be on the pine. So for me, I just think you're giving away a little bit too much size having Cam Murray and Victor Radley in your side. I think their body shapes are just a little bit too similar for me. And I would want someone like a Pappy, a Jack White, and one of these sort of guys on my 14. So, mate, I reckon there's a really good chance that Victor Radley could be one of the most unluckiest guys as far as rep football goes. He's so deserving to be there. And he will play, there's no doubt about it. But, mate, over the last 3 years, has he already given away 9 Origin jerseys or something like that? He's played so well, but whether it's injury, suspension, whatever it is, he hasn't been able to get in that side, and he's given Isaiah Yeo an opportunity to own that stage. And, I'm not sure if Isaiah Yeo could have done much more realistically. Yeah,
it's crazy. And the tough thing for Victor is that the combination of Luai, Cleary, even if, Isaiah Yeo isn't playing the best, the combination, that kept Cam Murray out of the 13 jersey. So, so Radley, I think that Radley gets a bench spot. I think that Fittler is such a fan of him, he finds a way to get him on the bench. I don't know how. I know that, New South Wales are so stacked, but I just think there's going to be a way to get him on the bench. I could be totally wrong, but for me, he is what Origin is truly. When you talk about Origin players, Victor Radley is an Origin player.
Mate, 100%. And I think for me, if I'm going to fit Radley in, it's probably a Sydney game. If I'm playing up at Suncorp on a fast track, I'll probably go for a Pappy. I think Sydney will be his best shot for Rads to get in. And, mate, what you said about him being an Origin player is spot on. He has got Origin written across his forehead. I'm just worried that he's given too many other class players too many opportunities. But, I mean, mate, if in 2 years' time the 13 was Radley and the halfback was Luke Keary, would you be overly shocked? Sorry, not the halfback. If Luke Keary was the 5'8", for example, Cleary will be the 7. But, mate, it's scary just to think how much depth we've got and how many guys could jump in, and it's unbelievable.
Oh, it's crazy because, you take it back 4 years and you just had no depth. There was no depth. It was always, we'll go with the old faithful because he's been in there before. He's been in the cauldron. He knows what it's about. That was honestly part of the reason you selected most of your players, over the last few years. Whereas now it's more just like you've got a bunch of players that in any other generation would get a start that aren't going to get a start. So, really interesting times for guys like Papenhuyzen and Radley. Really interesting times. It's going to be similar to. It's not going to be similar to the 8 in a row for Queensland. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But it's going to be similar in the sense that there's going to be a bunch of players in a generation that normally would have played aren't going to play for New South Wales, I think, over the next few years. Think about all the great players that struggle to get many games with Queensland during that time, like that would walk into the New South Wales side. So yeah, good. I mean, it's a good problem to have for New South Wales. Now, what was your number 9, Guru?
Number 9, Tom Burgess's try into Luke Brooks's length of the field run out of the in goals to put the ball down. Players going off their heads. It went upstairs, and you knew the game was going to be decided one way or the other. And my missus is a mad South Sydney fan, so it was a very stressful 3 or 4 minutes there. But I've never seen anything like that, for it to be a video ref to check both ends of the field, and that's going to be the deciding play. And even take it back 15 seconds before that, fucking Tom Burgess, a front rower, running 40 metres to score, like unheard of. It was an incredible moment, and we had tales of Tiger Town, and watching Madge in that moment, it was agonising to watch the emotions that he went through.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. It's the one person that should get more raps that doesn't get raps in such an incredible moment in a match that didn't really mean much for both. I mean, it meant a lot to the Tigers, but the ref let it go. A lot of refs would have just gone. Sorry?
Yeah, the ref could not have done his job better in that moment.
Absolutely.
And the commentators got stuck into him. Everyone blew up. It's like, what did you want him to do? He absolutely nailed it in that moment.
I mean, we wouldn't have that moment. If he had just gone if he hadn't, or he had just gone knock on or not knock on, or just stop the play. Because he could have stopped the play when that all happened. But for him to just allow it all the way to the other end, it turned a great moment into a moment that I think Rabbitohs and Tigers fans specifically will remember forever. Like, Matty, you remember that forever, won't you?
Yeah, I was at the game. I was at the game in like the middle of the South fans, and we didn't know what was going on. Like, we were standing behind the famous photo, or not famous, but that photo of Josh Mansell looking so confused.
Yeah.
But we were all as confused as him.
Yeah.
It was such a thrill when it came up on the big screen and Tom Burgess put that ball down, because we just assumed that he knocked it on.
Yeah,
and
the ref let it go.
So we thought it was gone, and then to get it back, it gives me goosebumps right now.
I mean, and again, doesn't happen unless the ref has the wherewithal to go, look, I don't know whether it was knocked on. I'm going to allow things to just go, And mate,
I think as well, it's something the referees that we overlook and we underappreciate. Mate, he's been running for 80 minutes himself. He's been keeping up with some of the best athletes in the world, and he had the brains in that moment to let it play out and see what happens. I mean, could you imagine if Tom Burgess did knock that on and he pulled Luke Brooks up on halfway to go upstairs to see if Tom Burgess knocked the ball on? I mean, like, it would just be chaos. I thought it was brilliant by him, and I don't think he got the compliments that he deserved.
No, I totally agree. I think the ref deserves a lot of raps for that. If you can, maybe find out who the ref was so that we can say his name.
Gerard Sutton.
Oh, Gerard Sutton.
Because I remember there's footage of him about to blow his whistle.
Yep.
I'll correct myself I'll look it up. I'll correct myself if I'm wrong, but I'm certain it was Gerard Sutton, because he's about to blow his whistle, and then you're right. He had the brains to go, play on.
Yeah, and also like the guts, because he's opened himself up to, massive blues. So, Tom Burgess made an incredible moment. Brooks made an incredible moment, but the ref allowed these things to happen. And I just think that refs is the worst setup ever, because the better you are as a ref, the less you're noticed. Whereas the worse you are as a ref, the better, the more you're noticed. So a good ref, no one notices. So when you're thinking back to who's a good ref, you can't remember, because the games that they refed, you don't know who was reffing. Whereas when they make one mistake, you remember that.
Yeah, and mate, I get people all the time complaining to me about refs that this one does this wrong, and I go, well, who do you want? And they've got no idea, because they've got no idea which one of them do exactly what you're saying. It's a crazy thing, mate. I sort of think it's part of our culture in rugby league. We need to sort of try and shift a little bit realistically.
Oh, I totally agree. Look, don't get me wrong. There's some refs that have made some shocking calls and had some shocking games where you're like questioning, like, how did that come about? But they're one every, in my opinion, I don't know, 20 games maybe. Most of the time, they're 50-50 calls that the ref, like, I just think refs get a bad rap. Like, do you really think they're going out there intentionally trying to, make the wrong call or anything like that? I totally agree. If we can somehow shift the culture of, these are blokes just that love the game probably more than anyone. If you're a ref, you've got to love the game more than anyone because you don't get any praise and all you get is negativity. I totally agree with that. Again, doesn't mean that you can't. It doesn't mean you can't break down a play where you feel the ref's got an error. Just like a player, you can break the game down and be like, look, he made an error. But at the same time, I feel like refs should get raps when they do a really good job. I thought during Origin the refs were fantastic. I thought the refs really let the game flow.
No, mate, they were brilliant. I think the other thing that people have got to appreciate is that the great thing about rugby league is there's so many grey areas. You don't know what's going to happen next. And the grey area, mate, I couldn't think of anything worse than trying to referee this game at the moment. It is faster than it ever has been. There is more rules than it ever has been. The smartest guys in the room are not the referees, they're the coaches, and they're trying to take advantage of the referees realistically. So it's a very tough gig. I think, I think we need to start appreciating the job that the referees do a little bit more realistically.
Absolutely. Now at number 8, we had Sam Walker at Knight's miraculous comeback against the Sharks. Is that what you had, Guru?
Yeah, mate, I had Sammy Walker here, and an incredible night for a guy. I think this was round 5 or round 6. So Keary played the first 2 weeks, and Walker came in. So this was very, very early days. He was very green, and I actually went back and watched highlights of this game to have a look at it. And, mate, Walker, he let in a try to Will Kennedy very, very early. Will Kennedy just ran over the top of him and scored. And, for most 18-year-olds playing their third game of first grade, getting dusted like that should rattle them. That's what I love about Walker. Nothing rattles him. He just stands up and delivers. He always wants the ball in his hand. It was 18-10 with 11 minutes to go, and he put this pass into Daniel Tupu on the left edge. Those big floating balls he does, which, were the trademark of him this year. And I watched the play before that. He went down the right edge. He dropped Tupanua down on the tram line, and then he just sprinted out to the other outside the post to get himself into the spot for the next play and landed that pass. Sort of did a bit of a double take on it like Joey used to do, and he let the defence come up and make a mistake. And it's just that whole think fast, play slow. You normally don't see that till guys are 30 years old. For Walker to be doing it when he's 18 in his third game of footy, it was unbelievable. And, the job wasn't done. Daniel Tupu, an unbelievable effort. I think you've said it a number of times. Probably the most underrated guy in rugby league. Definitely the most underrated winger in my opinion. But what I noticed was on the next try, he scored it himself. And he beat Chad Townsend.
Yeah,
now,
I was gonna say.
when you watch the defensive line, I'm sure you would have seen it too.
Yeah.
You watch the defensive line, mate, the winger, his torso is facing the sideline because he knows, this kid can throw a ball 20 metres whenever he wants. So then the centre's shifting out as well. So it's just an entire shifting line that are so scared they're going to get on the outside of him. Mate, it creates havoc with the defensive line when with all due respect to Sam Walker, probably every half in the game can throw that pass, but having the confidence to do it is just something else. And Walker's got the confidence to do it. So it shifts the whole defensive line. You saw Chad Townsend, he got sucked into the back rower, and then he just made a sprint for the sideline because he just thought that's sort of where the ball was going. Mate, he's got a special career in front of him, Sam Walker. We spoke about it a few weeks ago, how banged up he gets and stuff. But, mate, just that 15 minutes or so, I mean, it might be over the top, but that was Joey-like. I think he scored one and set up 2 or 3 in the last 15 minutes. It was incredible.
Look, I know people, when you say the word Joey, when you invoke his name, you immediately get pushback. I totally understand it. We don't want to have recency bias and start comparing players, and then the dust settles and we go, okay, maybe it wasn't. But I totally agree. I think that was Joey-like. That 20 minutes, there isn't many halves that could really, because that was the beauty of Joey. Like, he could just make things happen, just out of nothing, and he would be so deceptive with the ball. He would. It sounds like the same. He would keep throwing the ball long, and then he'd hit this incredible short ball. And it was all about putting these thoughts in the defensive line's head of constantly being worried about the option that he's actually not going to take. And Sam Walker did that. He was throwing these crazy long balls, scored 1 or 2 tries off it. Then he throws a dummy. Townsend's no mug either. Townsend's experienced. He's won a grand final. He's beat Townsend. Beat the Melbourne Storm in a grand final. So for Sam Walker to be playing mind games with a defensive line at 18 years old, it is incredible. I cannot express People don't understand that these weren't tries where, oh, how good was it that Sam Walker just executed the last pass on a really great play because he had an extra number on the side, like on the edge there. These were plays that were concocted and created purely by Sam Walker's mind. Do you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Where, usually we see a young guy come in and we're giving him major raps because he executed a coach's play. We're going, the coach's play that he's been training all preseason, he nailed it. Fuck, what a good player. Sam Walker literally went out there and just conjured up deception, conjured up execution, and that was what was so incredible about that 15 minutes. Again, we're not sitting here saying he is Andrew Johns, but it was very Johns-esque of taking a game by the scruff of the neck, using deception and manipulation over a period of time to score tries in both directions.
Yeah, and I think as well for people that are listening, like it's worth going back and watching the highlights of that game, and it's worth watching the play before they score off, where Sam Walker, he dumps Tupu over on the right touchline. The play before where he scores himself, you see him behind the ruck and he's barking at Jared Rea-Hargraves, get one to the sticks, take it there, and then he gets the ball. Like, it made even to be 18 years old. Imagine if I said to you, hey, can you scream at Jared Rea-Hargraves and tell him where to be? Yeah. I couldn't think of anything worse.
100%.
And this kid is, and people say, oh, he's been doing it all preseason. He really hadn't, because he wasn't the halfback in the 5'8". He hadn't done those sort of reps in the preseason. He'd stepped in here and there.
He was third or fourth in line.
Exactly. Yeah. And now here he is, round 5 against the Sharks, who, I mean, they're a tough bunch too, Cronulla. That's what they've been built on. They're tough. They're resilient. Mm-hmm. And for him to have that sort of game when they're down, I thought it was incredible. And, there was the last pass he threw to Brett Morris in that game where Tedesco dug into the line, and then Sam Walker got the ball a little bit wider, and he wasn't at first receiver like he is sometimes. He's a little bit wider and threw another one of these floating balls. And I think people underappreciate how much balls it takes to let the ball float in the air for that long.
When you're
the longer the ball's in the air, the more opportunity it is to get snatched, the more opportunity the defensive line has to react to it. Walker makes it look so easy, it's not even funny.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Totally agree. And the guts, when you're behind, if they take that intercept and run the length, he's a villain. He's the worst bloke in the world. What an idiot. Why are you throwing long balls? Just get through your set, build pressure, all the typical stuff we hear. So that was an incredible moment to watch. And again, I totally agree with you. It wasn't just Sam Walker came out and had a blinder. It was Sam Walker came out and got busted up by Wade Graham in that first half. Like, they were targeting Sam Walker, and Wade Graham was a king of that. Wade Graham gets injured. They go away from busting Sam Walker up. And then he has the mental fortitude in the second half to bounce back. Do you know what I mean? It's one thing it was just his day, but I think it's going to get lost in the fog. It wasn't Sam Walker's day. He was getting fucking just blokes running left, right at centre of him. He was holding his shoulder. So it was actually, he fought to make it his day, and that makes it even more incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, we obviously said before, whenever you mention Joey, people sort of shit themselves and get upset. But the other thing about Joey is that he could have been a back rower if he wanted to.
Yeah.
Sam Walker's 79 kilos.
True.
Like, for him to be doing what he's doing is just incredible. And, he obviously went on to have a number of big moments throughout the season, but it definitely is that Cronulla game where he really did, announce himself on the big stage. We've heard about this kid for so long. There's been years where, the last year, that's the other thing with Sam Walker that people underappreciate. Mate, the kid didn't play rugby league last year. Because of COVID, he did not play rugby league.
Yeah. And
now he's come out in his third game of first grade, and he's dissed it to the Cronulla Sharks. I mean, they won a premiership 4 or 5 years ago. They were a top 8 team the year before that.
Yep.
It's unbelievable.
Now, the next we've got here is Parramatta and end Melbourne Storm's winning streak with a 22-10 victory. They go on to finish the season pretty well as Parramatta. So we've got some positive for the Parramatta fans. I feel like Eels fans do get a bit of flack for some reason, because they always finish in the top 5, and yet because they're on the edge of the powerhouses. They get the Eels have the expectation of a powerhouse without the same tools as a powerhouse. Do you know what I mean? They get the same pressure as a powerhouse. And you know what? You'd rather be that than a team that, we made the finals. How good's that? But I thought that was a massive moment for the Eels against a Storm, ending the Storm's winning streak. And it was a team that had been known to fade out at the end of the year. I actually think that it's sad for the Parramatta Eels because this really kick-started their momentum into a finals berth. You know what I mean? And then that game against the Penrith Panthers where they truly didn't deserve to lose, but neither did the Penrith Panthers. And this game against the Storm, I just think that would have given them enough confidence to really have cracked the Storm in the prelim final, and then they could have been in a grand final. What were your thoughts on this game where they broke the Storm's streak?
Mate, I was very vocal during the season, especially when I was talking to you, that I just didn't think Parramatta had it in them to compete in the finals. Mate, we got to the end of this game and I sort of went, fuck, all right. You know, here we are. They're about to go on this tough run of teams. I think people forget how hard Parramatta's run home was into the finals. It was incredibly difficult. This night they were unreal. Melbourne, you know, these funny sort of things happen in rugby league. Melbourne were trying to break the Roosters record from 1975, coached by Jack Gibson, captained by Arthur Beetson. Parramatta, they'd win a comp 5 years later, with Artie Beetson and coached by the great Jack Gibson as well. So it's funny how those little things happen in rugby league, beaten by Parramatta that night to not break that record. And, mate, I'll be honest with you, when I wrote this game down, because for me it was the game of the regular season, I straight away thought, geez, I remember Dylan Brown having a really good game that night. And then I went and checked the stats, and I mean, it was, 12 runs, it was 20 tackles and nothing else. And I was like, oh, mate, maybe I've got the game confused. I went back and watched it, and, mate, talking about what we were talking about with Dylan Brown the other night, it didn't show on stats, but, mate, he had a hand in 2 tries and he made 2 try-saving tackles that stopped tries in this game as well. They won by 12 points. He was worth about 20 points on this evening, but the way that we call try assists and line break assists in the modern game, he gets absolutely nothing for it. And then all of a sudden you look at the stat sheet at the end of the game and he's got duck eggs everywhere. But, mate, he had an absolute blinder that game, Dylan Brown. There's the second try they score, I think it's Hayes Dunster out on the left edge. The way that he manipulates Jerome Hughes and just sucks him in unbelievably, creates, a 3-on-2 for Clint Gutho with, granted, he has the ice still, but you get to the end of the game and Gutham's got a try assist, line break assist, mate. It's Dylan Brown that's created that. And I think that's quite often what gets overlooked when it comes to Dylan Brown as a footballer. He made 2 unbelievable tackles as well. There was one where I think it was Lume's going to score. Dylan Brown came from smack in the middle of the field. Ryan Pappenhausen palmed him off under the dot on the 40-metre line, and then he made a tackle on the left touch line a metre out to stop a try. Like, I know people want to bag Dylan Brown. After we spoke about him the other day, I had people message me and say, "Oh, you're just fanboys because he's a cool guy." But, mate, if you want to see what Dylan Brown is about, go and watch this game from start to finish and just watch him and the work he does. I know a lot of people are saying Dylan Brown's done. I think he's so far from it, it's not even funny.
Oh, man. I mean, just to clear things up, guys, I don't give a fuck who's a cool guy and who's not a cool guy. If you think...
Oh, exactly. It's ridiculous, yeah.
If you think that my footy analyst is based on how fucking cool a bloke is, look, honestly, look down between your legs and punch yourself in the dick right now because you are a fucking moron. How cool someone is does not come into consideration on who I think is a good footy player. If you go... There's 2 parts to rugby league. Let me repeat that. There is 2 parts to rugby league, defence and attack. Dylan Brown is one of the best defensive 5'8" in the game. Can his attack use some work? Absolutely. Is he 21 years old? Yes. How many times was Nathan Cleary absolutely pizzled in the first few seasons of his career? He's not a big game player. He's never going to amount to his name. He's ruined the club by signing him and his dad. He was getting crucified. We fast forward a couple years. Now he is being praised as one of the best players we've seen in a very long time. I'm not sitting here saying that Dylan Brown will eventually be that, but you cannot tell me that he doesn't have the foundations at the very least to be a premier 5'8". He's got all the physical attributes. His defence is already at an elite level. So one part of his game is at an elite level. It's just his attack where it's all confidence, in my opinion. And also, we have to remember, footy's a team game. When you have such a dominant player in Mitch Moses and Clint Gutherson, and you're the guy in between them, where does Dylan Brown get time to shine when you've got Gutho and Clint? I mean, we saw how Gutho and Moses go and skits at each other on the field. Dylan Brown's in between. Like, do we forget? It's silly. It's so silly. Again, of course, you'd want him to have more try assists. I'm not sitting here saying that Dylan Brown can't improve. We were very clear, very, very clear, that we want to see more out of Dylan Brown next year. But yeah, he is an elite level defensive player that is finding his feet in first grade and finding his role. What is he going to bring to the Mitchell Moses, Clint Gutherson combination? Because make no mistake about it, that team is Mitch Moses and Clint Gutherson's team. Whatever they say goes. And it's going to take a couple years for Dylan Brown's voice to be strong enough and balanced enough to be able to say to Mitch Moses and Gutho, oi, shut up, I'm taking a play down here, or not even shut up. Gutho, get down the short side, I need you there. And who knows, he may not develop into that player. I'm not saying he definitely will. But how many times do we have to see a young guy slowly develop into a gun before we realise that we can't expect these 21-year-olds and 22-year-olds to be mature 30-year-old players. We need to give them time to develop. And I think Dylan Brown, I think he had a solid year. I don't think it was bad at all. I think that you'd probably give him an 8 out of 10 for his defence and his attack maybe a 6, which would give him a 7 out of 10 year. So, yeah, I'm not understanding the Dylan Brown negativity. That's bizarre to me. I think he's actually progressing quite well when it comes to him as a footy player.
And mate, as I said before, if you go back and you watch this game and you just watch Dylan Brown, I think we get too focused on stats sometimes. And, I've heard a lot of people say he only had 2 try assists last year. Fuck, mate, he had 2 try assists in this game, as far as I'm concerned. There was one where he scooted down the short side. He came from the open side. He went down the short side. He created a 3-on-2. He drew him past to Bryce Cartwright, and Bryce Cartwright threw the ball to the winger, and they gave Cartwright a try assist. He had another one where he completely manipulated the defence. He put Clint Gutherson in a 3-on-2. Gutho gets a try assist. Like, it's very similar to Adam Reynolds at South Sydney. You watch what Adam Reynolds does, and, mate, he's not getting a try assist in every play, but he bloody well should, because he's creating all the opportunities for Cody Walker, and I think it's something that we really do underappreciate, where sometimes stats do lie.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's bottom line. I think people get too attached to stats and too attached to, Supercoach scores and stuff like that, when you've actually got to watch the way that this kid goes about his footy. And as you said, mate, this is Moses and Gutherson's team, and with all due respect to them, so it should be. They're 27, 28. They're almost 30-year-old, ball players in this team. It should be their team. It shouldn't be Dylan Brown's team. And, I'm the same as you. I'm not saying Dylan Brown's going to turn into a Premier 7, but, he might be a career 5'8", but there's nothing wrong with that. He has got supreme talent, and if you're doubting him, I think you're kidding yourself, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're setting the bar way too high for a 21-year. And also, are we forgetting that the Eels had the best year they've had since probably 2009? Like,
it's the closest I've seen them go to win a premiership, in my opinion, since then. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's bizarre. And so, look, I'm totally in the same boat as you. It's not to say that Dylan Brown will go on to be, the next Brad Fittler or something like that. But it is to say, let's not get caught up in stats. When you watch Dylan Brown play defensively, he's so good. He's so strong in D. And he'll grow in attack. He'll find his slot in attack where he knows when to say to Mitchell Moses, I need you to do this for me, or get to here for me, or it's just going to take time. It has absolutely nothing to do with how cool he is. What do you think? I'm fucking 16 years old. Oh my God. Oh, that is really cool. I'm a fan.
There's another play in this game where Moses takes down the left edge. They're about 10 metres out, and he puts in a kick, and he gets it all wrong. And Jerome Hughes catches it on the full, and you see Dylan Brown, he's chasing the kick. He actually runs past Jerome Hughes. He then tackles him back on halfway. Like, for him to run past him in 50 metres after he's turned and span and come back, for him to be there and make that tackle, there's so many things about Dylan Brown that we underappreciate. We are kind of repeating ourselves from last week, and I think people will apologise over the next few years. But, he's got so much to offer. There was another tackle in this one that stood out for me. Big Junior Paulo, he ran down Josh Addo-Carr.
Oh,
incredible
I remember that.
moment.
Yeah, I remember that actually. Mate, Junior Paulo, he is so mobile for how big he is. He's so mobile. I'm glad they signed him, because fuck, they couldn't afford to lose a Junior Paulo. How do you think
Yeah, go.
I was just going to say, how do you think the Eels have navigated this off-season? You know, it was silly of them to have this many people coming off. They've managed to keep Gutho. They've managed to keep Moses, because Moses extended in the season, mid-season. They've managed to keep Junior Paulo. They've managed to keep Regan Campbell-Gillard. They've lost Papali'i, Marnie, Kafusi, and Stone for 2023.
Yeah, look, I think the Reed Marnie one's a big loss. There's no doubt about that. I think the Ray Stone one, I could take it or leave it. The reality is, I don't think he's a 9 moving forward. I think he's a 13. You've got Nathan Brown there. So as much as I like Ray Stone, I think he's a great signing by the Dolphins. I don't think he's a huge loss for Parramatta as far as their squad goes. If you did need another 13, you could use Junior Paulo in that sort of role as well. So I think they will be okay without him. I think Isaiah Papali'i, mate, he's coming off a career high year that's come from nowhere. I don't mind Parramatta not paying huge overs to keep him there, to be honest with you. It's always a bit of a punt. If he's able to get that big money elsewhere, I'm sort of happy for him to make a move. It's very hard off a career high year to get to those levels. Once again, the Marnie one might worries me, but mate, the guys that you mentioned that they've re-signed between Moses, Gutho, and Paulo, mate, that's a team that's going to get you to finals footy every year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's, as much as we hate, as fans, it sucks that they sign a year out, but it gives the Eels such a chance now to go, okay, we've lost Marnie, we've come to grips with it. No, I forgot they signed Hodgson as well.
Yeah.
And so it gives them time to replace Marnie. And I think that the Eels are going to have faith in their development to go, okay, look, maybe we're not going to get a guy as good as Reed Marnie, but maybe we're going to get a guy that's on 200 to 300K that just delivers really good pill to Mitchell Moses and defends really well. And that's all we need from him. And then they can spend their money elsewhere. I agree with the Papali'i thing. I think, and look, he gets a bad rap because of what happened at the Tigers with Ryan Madison. But he is, you go and watch when the Eels are going well and Madison is playing, and I know he's had some issues with head knocks, and let's just assume he's going to be injury-free for the rest of his career. He is a fucking top-tier back rower. And I think the Eels were backing that. I think the Eels are going, look, Ryan Madison, they've probably got him for maybe 400, 300 to 400. Instead of paying Papali'i 600, we keep Madison because they re-signed. I'm pretty sure they extended Madison this year. It would have been probably for less than his worth due to the fact that he'd had some issues with head knocks. I think they're banking on the fact that, a year ago or a year and a half ago, Madison was in the New South Wales squad. And when you look at when the Eels are going well, Madison is a big part of that. Matter of fact, I think it might have been the Storm game where he was a big reason for 2 of their tries. I could be wrong. With crossfield kicks or something. Anyway, do you feel that they've kind of banked on the Madison being injury-free going forward?
Yeah, I think they have, and I would as well. I love Maddo. I think he's a tremendous player. I think people forget that he's a premiership winner as well. He came through that Roosters system. He won over there. Came up with a couple of big plays in that grand final as well. Like, he's a proper footballer. He's another guy that I would put him into that Victor Radley category that, I'm not sure if he's going to play Origin football now. He's probably been unlucky with his timing and everything, but mate, if he was to be picked tomorrow, he wouldn't let you down. He's a proper professional too, Ryan Madison. I'm sure that you've spoken to him on your podcast. You'd be able to talk more about it. But mate, every time I see him, everyone else has got a beer in their hand. He's got a kombucha. He seems to be training all the time. He just seems to be a complete professional. So I'm more than happy to back Maddo in to hopefully go injury free, because if he does, you've got a premier player as well. And you've also got a guy that can play lock forward as well. He's got a bit of handy balls because he can handle himself in the halves as well. Played a lot there when he was growing up. So, and the game you're talking about, he scored a few tries off kicks and whatnot. Mate, he's got that sort of ability. He's got that sort of ability to be able to pull something out of nowhere. And then you look at the stat sheet and he's made 45 tackles and he's missed none. And his edge is always so solid because of him. I'm a big fan of Maddo, and as I said, I think letting Papali'i go, I don't hate it. I think they've got enough guys to be able to cover that loss without a doubt.
Yeah, and it's, don't get me wrong, absolutely stings. Papali'i was playing such good footy. but I just think it was a reality of the salary cap. There's only so much you can do to keep certain players, and if they could have managed to find a way to keep him, it would have been incredible for the Eels. But I think they're banking on Madison, Brown to really cover, to cover that top tier of back rower that you need. I know Brown is a 13, but they're just that top tier edge back kind of players. Like you put Brown on his best day, you put Madison on his best day. That's right up there with Crichton. It's right up there with like Brown on his best day is, just a tick under Murray, a tick under Isaiah Yeo. He brings a very different kind of thing. And I think in Eels' defence, Brown and Madison, they've really struggled to get a long stretch of games together over the last 12 months. And the oomph that Brown brings, I think, is going to really help them in 2023. So, that was a big victory. Now, this is a really interesting one, this next one, because when it happened, it was huge. And then I think that Sharks, I don't think they handle it really well, but they kind of navigated their way out of it because they had such a good signing, and then they ended up signing really good players. But when you look back on hindsight, and the fact that they didn't make the finals, you could argue that the John Morris sensationally being sacked by the Sharks probably hurt them more than it should have, and probably ended up being they ended up paying the price of mismanaging the way they got rid of John Morris. Now, again, I'm not saying that it was a bad call to sign another coach, but the sacking of John Morris, I do feel it was handled poorly by the Sharks. Now that all the dust has settled, looking past the fact that they did end up signing really good players and Craig Fitzgibbon ended up signing with them, the fact of the matter is they missed the finals, whereas under John Morris they didn't. What are your thoughts on it?
I thought the sacking was an absolute shit fight. There's only half the teams that make the finals every year. John Morris made it 2 from 2. And then you consider what actually happened throughout those seasons, how much footy Sean Johnson missed, Matt Moylan, Wade Graham. Do you remember he had Josh Morris and he let him go to the Roosters because he had Bronson Xerri? Then he lost Bronson Xerri. He lost 2 guys that, Josh Morris is an Australian centre. I think Bronson Xerri would have been an Australian centre over the next few years. Like, he lost premier players. You had, Josh Dugan, who, like, he wasn't himself for a very long time there. There was so many guys. And
he had a salary cap. He had salary cap. I think it was like $700K or something, or whatever the number was, due to the Flanagan situation. So he actually had less of a salary cap to work with because of this Flanagan situation.
Yeah, Andrew Fafeta, with all due respect to him, like obviously not the same player that he used to be as well. Like, he was the best front rower in rugby league 5 years ago. He's probably a bench front rower there. He's going to do his job, but it's a lot of oomph that you've lost there as well. I mean, I just think that John Morris had so many things go against him, and he still managed to make finals 2 years in a row. Now, granted, last year was a shortened season. They had a record of 10-10. I understand that. At the time, they were the worst team to ever make finals. But, I mean, he got them there, all things considered. I thought it was very tough on him to get dumped. I think that I'm not sure if I've ever seen something so poorly handled that's turned out so good, to be honest with you. It's crazy to think about it in hindsight.
Yeah, I think the signings that they got and getting Fitzgibbon across there really, it was like a strong Band-Aid. And I think that we can't, it's very easy to forget that the same people that are overseeing Fitzgibbon treated John Morris like this. And again, I'm not sitting here saying if you're a Sharks fan that you should be going, oh, okay, you know what? Actually, that's fucked, and our season was shit. Not at all. I'm of the mind we could be seeing. Now, you know what? I'll just say it. I'm of the mind. I've got that much faith in Fitzgibbon that we could be seeing the next club to push into that top 6, top 5, like the Parramatta Eels did a few years ago. I truly. That's how much I rate Fitzgibbon. That's how much I think he's going to bring. So I'm really bullish on the Sharks being that next side. But everything's great now because they've signed Hines, they've signed Finucane, they've signed, Cam McInnes. The concern is if they struggle, will the board treat the new guy like this? I'm assuming not, but it is just something to mention. It's something just to not forget. Yeah,
and look, I had Craig Fitzgibbon on my podcast started last year. Champion fella. Awesome bloke. The one thing I will say about Craig Fitzgibbon that I think people are maybe overlooking a little bit, and, this is sort of playing devil's advocate a little bit. Mate, Craig Fitzgibbon has been in that Rooster system for 20 years. He arrived there in, I think it was 2000. He's never left there. It's always been an extremely well-run system. He's been under Trent Robinson, the best coach in the game. I think it's sort of a bit like what we were talking about with the Bunnies coach. Like, you're under Wayne and you learn so many things, but there's probably already also so many things that you probably aren't able to grasp as well because they're just so used to going about their business. So I think it'll be interesting if the Sharks do struggle a little bit more than what we're anticipating, which I don't think they will. But if they do, I mean, this board has shown that apparently having a winning record isn't enough at their club. So it could be really interesting times. And it seems to me when you hear Dale talk, when you hear Nico talks, it sounds like Craig Fitzgibbon was the guy that got them over the line. So it's a really interesting situation, and I think Craig is going to be put in a lot of spots this year that he's got no experience in, which is completely fair enough. He's a first-year coach. But I think they do need to be patient with this side. He's also coming from this Roosters team. He now doesn't have a halfback realistically. He's going to have to sort of makeshift his way through that. He's got Nico Hines coming in, who's a star, but he hasn't played with any of these blokes before. So there's going to be a lot of tests down there in Cronulla. I think that they are good enough to be a top 6 team. I've got them sort of penciled in at 6, 7, 8 for next year. I'm confident they make finals. I don't think they can win a comp, but if they get a few crucial injuries in the halves or if Nico Hines goes down, it could be really interesting times over there at Cronulla.
Oh, absolutely. I've got next year, I've got incredible year. They finish 6th. Average year they finish 8th and then 9th. So I've got them between 6th and 9th next year. But then the following 2 to 3 years with a guy like Finucane building the culture, if they can really, and that's where I'm really bullish on the Sharks because I feel Fitzgibbon has identified Finucane as that guy, and everyone knows that like Craig Bellamy, the GOAT coach essentially, or at least one of them, has Finucane as basically his main guy. Like he rates him that highly. But you're right, it's going to be really interesting, and it brings up a really good point that I think we may have discussed it before. If not, it brings up a really good point that Adam O'Brien, the Knights coach, he went to the Knights. It's Adam O'Brien, isn't it? Correct?
Yeah.
So the Knights coach,
AOB, yeah.
Adam O'Brien, he was with the Storm, he was with the Roosters, and when he went to the Knights and things weren't clicking, you could see like his frustration in the press conferences. And he even actually came out a couple months later and said he was probably too harsh on his players in the press conference. And I think that it's a really good example, exactly what you were saying, is that you can't expect to go to the Knights and think it's going to be at the same standard as the Roosters. You've got to allow time for those standards to be built. And I think if there's one thing that you would be telling Craig Fitzgibbon going to this, and to be really clear, who the fuck am I to tell Craig Fitzgibbon anything? It's to be aware that all the little things that you're so used to, like when you rock up, there's all the young boys, they're all already doing extras, and the older boys have, they're doing passes with the rookies coming through, and they stayed back and you didn't even have to say anything, and all the supplements are there ready to go, and all the staff are working at this crazy. I think that Fitzgibbon needs to be aware that maybe it's going to take a year or two to get to that point, or even maybe 3 years, where the culture is so good that everyday standards are the same as Roosters. Because let's be really clear here, all of the bottom teams, their standards, their everyday standards when it comes to training, when it comes to video sessions, aren't at the same level as your Roosters, as your Storms. And I think that Adam O'Brien maybe fell into that trap a little bit, expecting the boys maybe to be similar to what he was like at the Roosters and the Storm. And I agree with you. I think that just like the Knights need to be patient with Adam O'Brien, I think Craig needs to be patient with the Sharks. What are your thoughts on the comparison to the Knights?
Yeah, I think it's really fair. And, all I could just think about them was Craig Fitzgibbon over the last 4 years, sitting in video sessions, talking to his halves, and he's talking to Cooper Cronk, Luke Keary. I mean, these are premier guys to ever play our game. Now he's walking to Cronulla, and this is with all due respect to those guys, but you got Braden Shindle, who's a young guy. You got Matty Moylan, who hasn't played his best footy in 4 or 5 years. You got Nico Hines, who, personally, I think he's a better fullback than he is 5'8". I think he'll do a good job at 5'8", no doubt about it, but he's also young and inexperienced. yeah, I'm also looking at this side, and I think Cam McInnes will play 13. And I think Cam McInnes is one of the best defenders in rugby league, so I would have him there without a doubt. But the attacking side of things, I mean, he's not a Victor Radley, and that's the other thing that the Roosters have had for years is Radley. He's essentially a halfback in jersey 13, so it's going to be a huge transition. And I hadn't even thought about the Adam O'Brien comparison, but I think it's spot on, mate. You go from these top clubs where everything is set out, as you said, even the day-to-day at training. But then you get out on the field and you get to those big moments and you don't have those experienced heads that are signing with the Roosters or with the Melbourne Storm, probably for less money, which also allows you to put more guys around them. Like, it's going to be a tough gig. And if they have one or two injuries, which it's the NRL, you're going to have injuries. You're going to have injuries in key spots. It's going to be a very, very interesting time for Cronulla. I've got them penciled in 6th, 7th, as you said as well. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be as rainbows and smiles as a lot of people are telling me.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to take time. But what I like about the signings that Fitzgibbon has made is that I think, again, I've got no idea, but I think he's identified that. I think that he's gone and said, I need to make 3 signings that are all about culture, that are all about the little details, they're all about hard work. And I think McInnes, Finucane and Hines are exactly that. And so, look, I'm a massive fan of Fitzgibbon. He's actually the defensive coach, I'm pretty sure, for New South Wales. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah, he was up until obviously this year.
Up until this year. So, I mean, this guy's resume, you can't get any better. You honestly, outside of him going to the Super League and winning a comp, you really can't get a better resume than a Craig Fitzgibbon. So I have big faith in it. But to be really clear, let's not forget the Josh Morris, the handling of that, I thought was really poor and unfair on Morris. I feel that I understand the Sharks wanting to get rid of him early because if he then went on and took that team to like a top 6 finish, it would have made them look silly. But I think they probably needed to, in my opinion, I feel like the board probably should have swallowed their pride and just said, you know what, if he does, let's back our decision and have confidence in our decision to bring Fitzgibbon across anyway. You know, even if John Morris does take us to top 6 in some crazy season, let's back our decision and say we are confident that Fitzgibbon is the man for the job. And I feel that I understand why the board did it. You know, they're trying to protect the Sharks brand. They're trying to protect their decision. I totally get that. I'm not sitting here saying it would have been an easy decision for anyone, or that they even wanted to do it. But if that was me in that position, I would have backed my own decision of we believe Fitzgibbon is a better first grade coach than John Morris. Even though we love John Morris as a bloke, that's my decision. And I tell you what, if Fitzgibbon comes in and we go worse, I'll fall on my sword and I'll see you later. That's the way I probably would have handled it. Very easy to say when it's not your job on the line. So maybe I wouldn't have done that. So interesting times for the Sharks. At least they've got a bit of hope. That's the one thing I think the Sharks, since they won that grand final and they lost all of those club legends essentially, it's been very directionless and rudderless. We haven't really seen, who are the Sharks? Where are they going? I feel like we have a very clear direction of where the Sharks are going now. What do you think, Guru?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, we just spoke about that night where Pabby scored 4 tries and we said, you know, you can lose a game of football in 5 minutes. You just know that with Dale, Cam, the Sharks aren't going to be one of those teams. They are going to hang in the grind. They might not score as many points as some of these top-tier teams without an established 7, but he has recruited the right culture guys that I just know they're going to be okay. Defense, it still wins premierships. I think they're going to be one of the better defensive sides in this competition. So, mate, I just can't believe how well this has turned out for Cronulla based on how, I'm pretty sure John Morris got sacked the week after Sam Walker put on that masterclass. And I remember thinking then, good God, for them to play the Roosters and get beat by 4 points when they were up by, 10 with 10 minutes to go, for a coach to get sacked last night, like that week, they must have just been waiting for the opportunity for him to lose a game of football so they could get rid of him, especially after making finals the last 2 years. The optics were terrible. They were awful. From what I gathered, a lot of the Sharks players were John Morris fans, but I mean, I don't think you could possibly not be a Craig Fitzgibbon fan as well. So, man, I'm looking forward to having this conversation in a year, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. And just quickly, someone left a comment, which is really a really good comment and a really good question, because we were saying we're extremely worried about the Knights because they don't have halves. obviously Clifford is developing into one. But they left a comment, and I'm assuming they're a Knights fan. They were saying, how can we say that we're worried about the Knights that don't have a half, and yet we're saying the Sharks, we think they could go really well when they don't have a half? What are your thoughts? And then I'll give my thoughts, Guru.
Yeah, I thought it was a fair shout. Jake Clifford played some great footy last year. I'm not totally convinced if he's going to do that for 26 weeks straight. It's a much tougher gig. I just think that this Sharks team, the guys they've recruited, the guys that are in this team, I just think defensively they're going to be so much better. And, the Newcastle Knights, with all due respect to them, even when Mitchell Pearce was playing, they weren't a sensational defensive side realistically. They were much better in attack, no doubt about it, and they were good enough in attack to be able to beat most sides outside of the top six when Pearcey was there. But I understand where he's coming from. But I just think when you look at this side from one end to the other, the Cronulla Sharks, and you look at what they've done over the last few years, the guy that's walking in as coach, I can just see them being more successful than the Newcastle Knights. I just think the halfback is going to be such a big miss for Newcastle. And, mate, hopefully this bloke messages me in a year's time and goes, you're an absolute muppet, Jake Clifford carved, because that's what I want to see happen.
Absolutely.
I want Jake Clifford to kill it. I want KP to stay in Newcastle. I want them to be a powerhouse in rugby league. But I'm just calling it as I see it at the moment, and I don't see it playing out that way.
Yeah, I agree. It's absolutely a fair shout, and that's why I remembered it, because I'm like, it's a good point. But when you look at the specifics of it, I would say, is Clifford that much better than Trindle? I would say probably not. I actually really rate Trindle. I think that Trindle has a lot to offer. Now, don't get me wrong, Clifford is further along in his development, but I don't feel that if you put Clifford versus Trindle, it would be a 50-50 bet who wins that battle, in my opinion. Again, I know Clifford's further along, and I hope Clifford kills it. He's shown some really good things. Whereas when you look at the number 6 for Knights, who's that? Guess who the number 6 is for the Sharks, most likely? Nico Hines. Yeah. And that's the difference. You've got Trindle, who essentially is as good as Clifford. You've got Matty Moylan, who definitely can, if he plays his best footy, is as good as Clifford. And then you've got Nico Hines, who is, honestly, any other year, you could argue was a top 3 player in the whole comp. There was a period there where his stats were out of this world. He just got swallowed up by the Tom Trbojevic machine. And so I think that is truly the difference. Now, you could make the argument, all right, well, Will Kennedy versus Kalen Ponga. But I just feel that, yes, obviously Kalen Ponga at the moment is a better player, but Kennedy is still playing some really good footy, and he actually got the Player of the Year for the Sharks. So the biggest issue for the Knights is their 6 is we don't even know who it is. Is it Phoenix Cross? We have no idea.
Yeah, and it'll be an unpopular opinion, and that's fine. You base it solely off 2021 form, mate. I think there's an argument that Will Kennedy potentially played better than KP last year. I thought Will Kennedy was unreal for Cronulla. To think that they just signed Nico Hines and there isn't even a conversation about him playing fullback, I think Will Kennedy is incredibly underrated in rugby league.
You know what? It's a fair shout of what you just said, where to think Nico Hines isn't even considered fullback. That's a really good point. I would say, I do believe Kalen Ponga performed better. What hurt him this year was injuries.
Yep.
But to your point, Will Kennedy pretty much played every game. So it's not just about the one-off performances. It's about who delivered over the whole season more. I would still say Kalen Ponga, but I see your point. It's going to be probably unpopular opinion, but it's a fair shout. It's a fair shout.
And if you disagree with that unpopular opinion, that's fine. But I think you got to admit that the gap between Ponga and Kennedy over the last year, I think it's a lot closer than what people, what you initially think. If you just watch the way that Will Kennedy played, and you also mentioned, Jake Clifford and Braden Trindle. Is there really much difference between them? I don't think there is. But if you said to me, name your top 12 halfbacks in rugby league, I don't think either of them get a start.
Mm.
And then I have to look at the rest of the side, and that's where I sort of start to lift the Cronulla Sharks up a little bit. I think they're both good young players. I think they're both handy. I think we keep coming back to it. They're young. It takes young halves a long time to develop. There will be your exceptions, Joey, Freddie, Cleary, these sort of guys. But the reality is that it takes time for these guys to develop. They've jumped around a couple of systems and whatnot. So I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year these guys are, proper first-grade halfbacks that are going to be there week in, week out. But at the moment, they're young and they've still got a heap of development to come over the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking about 2021 form. We're not talking about Kalen Ponga career versus Kennedy career. We're talking about, I would still have Kalen Ponga ahead though. When he did play, fuck man, he helped the Knights to so many victories. He was crucial in so many victories. But when you first said it, I was like, Guru, you're off your head. But when you sit down and really think about how impactful Kennedy was to that Shark side, even though they didn't make the 8, it's not as crazy. It really isn't as crazy as you think. So it's a fair shout, that. I want to think about that because it's a fair shout. Because Kennedy, I will say, Kennedy was probably the most underrated fullback of 2021. That's a fair shout.
If you said to me you have to pick one of them to be your fullback, I'm going to go with Kalen Ponga. Yeah, I'm not arguing that.
Yeah.
But 2021, I think there is a fair shout that Will Kennedy probably outplayed him. Has he got the same skill set? Has he got the same highlights? No way. But he did his job for Cronulla week in, week out. And I come back to once again, Nico Hines, who I would argue is probably a top 7 fullback in rugby league right now, isn't even being considered for the fullback jersey at Cronulla.
It is interesting. It's a very interesting point. I like it. I think it's going to spark a lot of chitter-chatter in the comment section, but I like it. I think it's fucking, you've put your balls on the line, Guru. You've put them on the table. They might get chopped off, but that's okay. We move forward. We keep going.
Won't take up much of your table, don't worry.
Okay. This one was one of my favourites. This was honestly, this could be number 1 for me because this is how much. Number 5, Wayne Bennett versus Ivan Cleary feud erupts. Now, during the feud, it was a clear win by Wayne Bennett. Wayne Bennett, the master, the guru, the big balls Bennett has done it again. He's manipulated the media. He's got his coach that's all rolled up against. But at the end of the day, who walked away with the chockies? What did you think about this blow up?
Mate, when you look at this little feud just in a bubble on its own with no hindsight, as you said, it's a knockout victory to Wayne. I couldn't believe the way that Ivan reacted. I was just looking at him going, fuck, he is paying rent in your head right now. You've ran into this trap. It's unbelievable. And it was very un-Ivan from what I thought, from what I knew of Ivan. I couldn't believe it. And, all I could picture was the drive home and Nate sort of going, oh, you kind of shit the bed there. What on earth was that? But, mate, you chuck hindsight into it. You take it out of the vacuum. And I love Wayne. I think he's probably the best coach we've ever seen. But he got out-coached that night for me. It was a game that was, and no shock. It was refereed a little bit differently to probably your regular season games. It was a little bit tighter, which happens in every finals game of every sport in the universe. And I think Ivan reacted the quickest to it. We're now seeing rule changes that are going to probably come in off the back of that grand final. But mate, credit to Ivan. He addressed what was going on. He saw what was in front of him. He adapted to it. And yeah, as you said, who came home with the chockies at the end? Ivan had the trophy at the end of the year. So well done to him, mate, to pull himself off that canvas. Because I'm sure there would have been a moment where Ivan would have got home that night, looked at the ceiling, and just gone, fuck, what just happened? How on earth did I just let myself get that rattled? But then, mate, 6 weeks later, holding a trophy to go on the finals run they did. We'll talk about it later. But I thought it was incredible by Ivan. I still don't think he's getting the compliments from 2021 that he should. I thought it was an incredible season from him, what he achieved.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it makes me think, and I'm probably way too conspiratorial about this, but was it intentional? Because it was so out of character for Ivan. Just to come out and be so public about it, and also to almost start it. To be going to the media and saying, well, this got, Wayne went to the refs and asked them to stop doing this. Like, it was so out of character and out of nowhere. It was almost like a play that Wayne would make to put pressure on the referees. Like, this is a Wayne move to pressure the referees to protect their players, protect the Penrith Panthers Blues or the Rabbitohs players. And so, I mean, whether it was intentional or not, it clearly had the desired result for Ivan. It clearly galvanised his team. It clearly made the refs very, very vigilant on specific things that that both coaches wanted, because it was a very tightly reffed game. But I agree with you as well. I think that in the game, I think that Wayne Bennett he has certain principles that he kind of abides. Like, Wayne Bennett's teams have never been, stretching the rules and like a lot of wrestle and all that kind of stuff. Whereas I think Ivan, he saw the holes in the new rules. He saw ways in which that they could be manipulated. Very, very Bellamy-esque, I would say. Very like Bellamy for years has been so good at just here's the edge. I'm just going to keep pushing. I'm going to keep pushing it. Robinson does it to an extent. And this is, please don't conflate this with cheap tactics or anything like this. This is winners winning at all costs. And I think that Ivan was aware that if they laid in the ruck a little bit longer, we're willing to give away a few 6 agains just to feel how long can we lie on them? How long before, let's play a bit of game of chicken with the refs in a grand final. Will you blow the whistle and give a 6 again, or will you allow it to go? And I agree with you. I think in the grand final, you could probably say Ivan Cleary outcoached Wayne. But when you talk about the verbal sparring match, it was a 10-8 round KO. Oh, my God, I think he died in the ring kind of stuff. But Ivan Cleary on the night, he does not get enough raps for how he has turned that club around. He does not get enough raps for the fact that we've spoken about it with Nathan Cleary, but 2 years ago, they didn't have a single player that was best in position. That is a fact. That is a fact. Now they have multiple people that you could argue are best in position. And guess who the coach has been over the last 2 years? And guess who was the undercurrent reason for last year? Apparently it was Trent Barrett. Apparently Trent Barrett had come in and he was the reason why they were going so well. Trent Barrett leaves, they take another step, they go even better. Again, not to say that Trent Barrett didn't help, not to say that he wasn't good, but Ivan Cleary is not getting the raps that he deserves.
And, mate, I think there's a fair argument. All anyone told you was that Trent Barrett was so good for their attack. And we got to the back end of the season and, with all due respect to Penrith, their attack was pretty bang average, but their defense was unbelievable. So, I had people say to me, the Panthers have a squad built for the modern rules. They wouldn't have won a comp 10 years ago. I'm going, bullshit. Did you see the way they adapted? They adapted in game. I mean, you said before that Penrith's mindset was, we'll see if you give a penalty. Mate, I think their mindset was, you give a penalty, but then we're going to bash the opposition on the next 2 tackles, and it's not going to fucking matter anyway.
Yeah.
I just think they went in there with the objective to give away 6 agains. They knew that they could gear up their defense. They got out there, and the eye test said, hey, it's not a 10-metre, it's an 8-metre. We lay all day in our own half. We belt them, and then they're only going to make 30, 40 metres on every single set. And I don't think South Sydney did enough of that. And, I had South Sydney fans saying, Penrith got away with murder. It's like, same ref, same field, same game. Better coaching at that moment.
And it's all about adapting. It's all about, if the ref is, allowing Penrith to lay on, well then, okay, you lay on and find ways, kick early. I think there was plenty of opportunities for Rabbitohs to win that game. It wasn't so poorly reffed that they were just reffed out of the game at all, in my opinion. Again, we have to look at it. How did they lose the game? It was from an intercept, to give credit to Rabbitohs, they also defended incredibly. I mean, this was not a blowout. This was not a blowout at all. This was a tit for tat. Who's going to break first? And the only real break, in quotation marks, was a cutout ball caught by one of the most genetically gifted tall athletes we have in the NRL. Anyone else on that wing, other than maybe Daniel Tupu, it goes over his head and they probably score. And that was the difference. That was truly the difference.
Yeah, mate, I've said a few times in the last few minutes that I think Ivan outcoached Wayne unbelievably. They won by 4 points.
Yeah.
I mean, there wasn't much in it. It was tight as it could have possibly been. It came down to an intercept. I mean, I was talking to Nathan Cleary a few weeks ago, and he said that, Stephen Crichton, he practices that sort of stuff, and that's all good and well, but there's, when you go for an intercept, you are going all chips in. I mean, if he doesn't take that ball, if he's a second later, I think Cody Walker's a Clive Churchill medalist. He's the unluckiest guy to never win a Dally M medal this year. The narrative is complete, and all of a sudden, Ivan's a moron. It changes everything. It all comes down to that split-second moment, and that's where you want guys. You called him a genetic freak, and he is just something else, Stephen Crichton. He is unbelievable, and you want those guys in your teams that, South Sydney, they've got one of those guys, but he wasn't on the field, Latrell Mitchell.
Yeah.
And that can be the difference in these big games.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at Trell, how many games has Trell saved and won and changed and a huge play? I mean, Greg Inglis was the king of it. The king of it. New South Wales were winning. They had us done. And then Greg Inglis would just make a play that only Greg Inglis could make. And it's the same with Crichton. Again, I'm not saying he's Greg Inglis, but Steve Crichton made a play that only Steve Crichton could make. And you know what? He made at least 2 to 3 similar plays in the final series. Put it this way, Steve Crichton is the most underappreciated player of the whole final series. Because without him...
He was the MVP today.
Without him, Parramatta Eels win that game. He had an intercept. He had try-saving tackles. Crichton made at least 3 plays in the final series that won the Penrith Panthers the game. And he did it in the grand final.
Mate, he had a tackle in the prelim against Melbourne on Justin Olam that was unbelievable. He also came up with the first try there. It was a set play for Penrith.
Yep.
The Nathan Cleary knew all season he was waiting for the moment to use it. And he took that moment, and I said to him on my podcast, like, is there a better bloke in the universe to kick to outside of Stephen Crichton? And he sort of said, mate, as long as the ball hit my foot, he was going to catch it. It didn't matter where it was going in that vicinity. He's just that sort of a guy. And yeah, mate, there is a game there is a moment in every single one of their wins in the finals where I think they lose it if Stephen Crichton isn't on the field.
I totally agree. And it's that X factor. You could do nothing all game, but you'd pay him $500,000 a year just for those moments, just for those moments. So yeah, huge. That's why I love doing these top 10s, because like the Wayne Bennett Ivor Cleary thing, we speak about it in time when it happens, and it was, oh my God, what is doing Ivan Cleary? Just don't say anything. It's getting worse. But at the end of the day, when the only thing that matters, it doesn't matter how cool you look, because we don't care about that here on Bloke in a Bar, how cool you are. We care about winning footy matches. And what do you know? Ivan Cleary won the footy match. Now, number 4, this is something that definitely got lost in the ether. Cameron Smith retires on the eve of the season. What were your thoughts on how that happened? Me personally, I absolutely loved it. You know why? Because he didn't dance to anyone else's beat. He didn't, give the media what they wanted, and he didn't go around like everyone was complaining. He's got to say this and he's got to say that. And yet, he doesn't have to say anything. As long as the Storm and him are happy, and his own family's happy, that's all that matters. And Cam Smith went out exactly the way he wanted to go out.
Mate, I thought it was one of the most underrated moments of the year when Cameron Smith took 10 footballs to a park with him and started kicking to corners. I just thought that was one of the greatest trolls of all time. The entire rugby league world is waiting to see what the GOAT's going to do. And just to take he knew he wasn't playing at that point. He knew he wasn't playing in November the year before. He goes down to the park with a heap of footies and kicks to corners. I just thought that was incredible. I think it's something, we talk about Taumalolo, how strong he is. We talk about, Tom Trbojevic, how strong, how fast he is. Mate, to his last day in rugby league, Cameron Smith was the smartest guy on and off the field. And I think it's an asset we don't give him enough credit for.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and when you look at his career, it is absurd. His career is absurd. And absolutely no disrespect to any current Storm players. I think they would all admit this, but Storm probably win the comp if he still plays this year. That's how influential he is at 38.
I had a Storm player say to me that they don't win 2020 if he's not there, and they win 2021 if he is there, about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. That's how good he is. And I just feel that, and this is to take nothing away from Penrith, absolutely not. This is more speaking about, and who knows? We could be totally wrong, and they get towed up by Penrith, and it's totally different. But if Cameron Smith plays this year, you know, it's a totally different. They in that semi-final, they just didn't look like the Storm. And if there was one player that could have gone, boys, what is doing? It's Cam Smith. That's how good he was at the end of his career. I think he probably went out playing the best footy we've ever seen from a player. I would say that, because even a guy like Billy Slater, when he went out, the tides were changing a bit. He'd gone through his injuries. He was still really good, but it was more, oh, wow, like Slater's still moving really well, but Tedesco was kind of entered the picture. You know, Tom Trbojevic had some good years. Whereas a Cameron Smith, in his last game of footy, he was undoubtedly, by a country mile, the best 9 in the game.
Mate, I would argue, I know Ryan Pappenhausen got the Clive Churchill. I thought Cameron Smith was the best on the field, to be honest with you.
They actually
get paid out at half time.
Yeah, yep.
It was insane. I remember at the end of the game looking at it, and he was like $1.08 to get it. And funnily enough, 2017 was the exact same thing. He was $1.08, and they gave it to Billy Slater. I think, you know, because of the narrative and everything, which was fair enough. But mate, I was surprised, like, not saying that Pappy didn't deserve that. Clive, he played unbelievably. He came up with probably the biggest play in that game, that try that he scored off the scrum. But mate, I thought Cameron Smith was unbelievable. And when you consider that he was in his 18th year of first grade, the rules changed completely to make the game faster than it ever has been, and the oldest bloke on the field was still the most important bloke on the field. It's mind-boggling. It's Tom Brady-esque. That's exactly what it is.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And the thing with the Cam Smith is, like, the Storm often get associated very strongly with the wrestle, and so did Cameron Smith. What I love about the new rules for his legacy is it drove home. No. The Storm aren't just these guys that are good at wrestle and they just managed to have a good dominant period. All the rules changed, and guess who was still the best player in the game? It was Cameron Smith. And we forget that Cameron Smith was playing before the wrestle came in as well, and he was playing for Queensland. And I really think it helped his legacy that the rules did get changed, because it said, okay, even his most like ardent people that dislike him have to admit he's the GOAT. Like, you just have to admit, at the very least, put it this way, he's the only player, his position, he's the only player that is out and out the GOAT in his position. Every other position, there's a debate. Like, some people don't think Joey's the best 7 ever. They say Sterlo, or they might, you know what I mean? Some people don't think that Glenn Lazarus is the best front rower. There's a bit of argument. There is absolutely zero. There's not even a peep from people that hate Cameron Smith that wouldn't say he is the greatest 9 of all time. Would you agree? Do you agree with he's the only player that is undoubtedly the GOAT in his position?
Oh, without a doubt. I think that it's Cameron Smith, and there's a gap, and then you can throw together, you know, Danny Medeiros, Benny Elias, Steve Walters. But I've never heard anyone really argue that any of those guys is better than Cam Smith. I think the other thing about the 2020 premiership is that, you know, people also want to say, oh, he always had Slater and Cronk. He didn't. He still got it done. He was 37 years old. He was playing they didn't play a game in Melbourne for the last 16 weeks. He was living out of a suitcase. Like, the more you think about what he achieved in that game, and, mate, Penrith were red hot at the back end of that game. You know, people forget. I think Brandon Smith was sent from the field. I think Jerome Hughes might have got 10 in the bin as well. Mate, it was a soccer team out there, and Cameron Smith just calmed it down, took control of the moment. It's incredible. And, you know, I said before, if, like, he was unlucky not to win the Clive that year, he was unlucky not to win the Clive in 2017. Mate, the grand final against Cronulla, if they scored on that last play, do you know how many tackles Cameron Smith made in that game?
How many?
He made 74 tackles in that grand final. 74. If Melbourne would have scored on the bell, he would have got Clive in that as well. I mean, it's insane to think about the career that he had. I've been saying for a while, if you split his career into half, I think both are immortal worthy.
That's so fucking true.
I think the first 9 years and then the last 9 years are both immortal worthy for me.
He's absolute shoo-in for immortality. Like, absolute shoo-in. The closest player I think don't get me wrong, I do believe Joey is the greatest 7. But I think there is a much more heated debate and a much more reasonable debate of, I actually think that this player is the best 7. Whereas I truly believe there is no reasonable debate that Cameron Smith isn't the best 9 of all time. Any reasonable person would not you just can't, he's undeniable. And that's why, even though I believe, I think that Lockie is the greatest player of all time, I know it's because of my bias, but you've got to look at Cameron Smith and you look at his career and everything he's achieved. No one has come close. No one has come close with what he's done.
And then, and not that they are the be-all and end-all, but winning has to matter at some point.
Yeah.
The bloke was, 9 Origin series he would have won, 8 or something along those lines. 5, 6 premierships. Sweet, take 2 of them off him. He still won 3 or 4. Yeah. It's unbelievable. And I mean, I'm sitting here going, geez, with all due respect to Penrith, I think if he plays this year, they potentially win a premiership. You can't say that for sure, obviously, but that's the sort of influence that this guy had. And
yeah,
I mean, before the other thing with Cameron Smith is that, he put up a really good argument that hooker is the most important position on the field because he was so crucial to Melbourne, but no one else has been able to replicate the sort of influence that he has on a football team. So we still sort of lean towards your halfbacks and your fullbacks probably being the MVP guys. But, mate, I think Cameron Smith, you can put him into any era of rugby league ever, and I think he would be just as dominant, and I think he would make the hooker position just as important. Yeah. Now, you ever think about the careers that are ruined because they existed at the same time as Cameron Smith? Fucking poor old Jake Friend.
Yeah.
He's won more premierships than Joey, most of the Immortals, and he doesn't even get a feature because he was a Queenslander that came along in the same era as Cam Smith.
Matty Ballon to an extent coming through.
Yeah, mate. So, you had this 5-year battle between Ennis and Farah, who was going to get the Blues jersey, and you wouldn't even have a conversation about them playing for the Kangaroos.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah, so Cam Smith retires, and again, I loved the way he did it. So casually, you know what? I'm just going to go down and announce, see you boys, right off into the sunset. He never, ever played the media game. He never really got involved in all that. Yeah, absolutely the best way to do it. Now, number 3, Turbo suffers infamous preseason injury, returns, has essentially the greatest season of all time. Now, when this all happened, when he got injured, I thought, we're done here. I thought we've just witnessed the most potential to never be reached in the history of the game. Truly believe that. I truly believed that Tom Trbojevic would be plagued with injuries throughout his whole career because he's just too finely tuned. Put him in the NFL or something, because that way they can just control his minutes. They can control, you know what I mean? It's, he does a few sprints a game and that's pretty much it. I was sitting there going, we have just witnessed the death of truly could be one of the greatest of all time. For him to come back and put the season on that he did, you couldn't write it. If you when we tell our kids the story of Tom Trbojevic, they won't believe when we say he had 6 line breaks, 3 tries, 2 try assists, 10 tackle breaks, and he did it every single week. They won't believe it. They'll be like, oh, they're just, rose-coloured glasses. Our parents are just, remembering the glory days. You know what I mean? They truly won't believe it.
And then you got to point out that Des Hasler probably took him off in the 60th minute to put him on ice.
Yes.
I mean, it's incredible what he did. I've spoken about this on my page, but, mate, just some numbers. He averaged 2.3 Dally M points per game last year. Per game. So if you go back to 2007, Thurston won the Dally M with 36 points. No one's ever scored more than 36 points. Thurston did it in 25 games. If Turbo would have played 25 games, he would have scored 50 Dally M points this year, if you keep that average, which is... Mate, do you remember how well Cody Walker played this year? He only scored 26 Dally M points, so he scored 9 less than Tom Trbojevic in 10 more games. It's just the more you look into it, the crazier it gets. He averaged 2.3 Dally M points, so he was at worst the second best player on the field out of 34 every week.
Every week, no matter what. And his stats are absolutely crazy. They're like, they're like 1.5 tries a game, 2.5 tries. There's something crazy, absolutely crazy. I don't care what anyone says. No one predicted this year from Tom Trbojevic. No one.
Not to this extent.
Nah. And what's really interesting is I remember a few years ago, someone said, I think it was along the lines of, would you sign Slater or Tom Trbojevic to Andrew Johns? I'm pretty sure. It was Tom Trbojevic and some established first grader. And he said Tom Trbojevic. And he got a lot of pushback. Everyone was going, are you serious? Like he's good, but he's young and rah. Joey could clearly see what this guy could do. But it just, even now when I think about the year that was, it still doesn't seem real. It still does, when you think about the dominance that he displayed and how it was like watching junior footy. It was like watching junior footy with the one team that has a gun that's going to end up playing NRL eventually, but we were watching it in NRL. And not only did he do it in NRL, he did it on the biggest stage in Origin as well. That game won from him.
He went to Origin without a position and was still the best player on the. They put number 4 or 3 on his back, but he just did his own shit. I mean, it was, and then you cast your mind back, to the start of the season. Manly looked like they were going to be lucky to finish last in the first 4 weeks without him. Yeah. All of a sudden, top 4 side with him, and they are demoralising teams by 50 and 60 points. Like, mate, it's a phenomenal season. I don't think we'll ever see anything like it. If we are going to see anything like it, you know who it's going to be. It's going to be Tom Trbojevic somehow outdoing himself.
Oh, I can't. Yeah. If that happens, that's you're totally right. At the start of the year, before he started playing, they were lucky if they weren't relegated. It was such poor footy, and it's shocking that the same blokes that were playing that footy played that crazy great footy for most of the season. You know what I mean? To think that same team, just with an extra player, could turn around and turn into the team that the Manly did turn into, and the team that they are now, it's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. I remember during the season, I think I said that he has just as much impact on a team as any player ever, maybe even the same as Joey. And it got a little bit of pushback about it. Like, a lot of people were like, oh, come on, man. Because, again, as soon as you invoke the Joey name, it's automatically. But it's hard to argue. It's hard to argue against this point. At least for this 2021 season, he's had the most impact on a team ever, outside of maybe Jared Hayne in 2009. But Jared Hayne, the Eels weren't going well, but I tell you what, they weren't coming last. They were coming 12th or 13th. Whereas Tom Trbojevic, the start of the Manly season, the first 4 games, it was the worst start since 2002 Cowboys. Second worst, if you take out that Cowboys 2002 start, it's the worst start to the season by a team ever in NRL history, since the NRL started 1999 or whatever. 97? 98? 98, yeah. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing.
The more you think about it, the crazier it gets.
Yeah.
It's just the more you want to dive into it, the more you want to look at Manly without him. You obviously mentioned it's similar to when Joey wasn't at Newcastle. I would argue that, the one thing Turbo's got to do is probably just own those big stages of finals footy, which we know he can do. He's done it in the Origin arena. But once he starts to really dominate those finals games, I don't know how anyone could push back on the Joey comparison as far as how effective they are to their individual team. Brad Fittler was very similar with the Chooks in the early 2000s. Freddie would leave, and that was a star-studded. They were all test players, and they'd all completely shit the bed without him, but not to the extent that this Manly side have. It's an incredible season. And, mate, there was even games in the back end of the year where he was out, but the guys around him had gained so much confidence in the 10 or 12 weeks leading up to it that they were a different football team to what they were in the first 4 weeks, which, to me, once again, is the ultimate compliment to Turbo.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's a very, very good point. You're totally right. He has dominated Origin multiple occasions, but until he dominates finals footy, you probably can't. You can make the comparison to Joey, because Joey probably maybe had a couple better players around him, but you would still probably put Joey at number 1. Especially when you put Joey, when you rerun that 2005 series, and you watch the impact he has on that whole series, you'd still probably have Joey at number 1. But I do believe that it's comparable. I think that Tom Trbojevic is right up there as one of the most impactful players on his squad ever. I think
And I think the '05 Origin series is always the go-to example. But, mate, you go and have a look at that '01 grand final against Parramatta. I think that Parramatta side's the best team to never win a comp, and Joey handled them single-handedly.
Well, they they scored the most points. That 2001 Eels side scored the most points in a season ever.
Mate, Brian Smith was taking players off at the end of games, leaving them on with 12 and 11 players just in case they had to do it come finals time. Like, they were something else. They are criminally underrated, that Parramatta side. And, I'm not sure, let's say that Parramatta side is the equivalent of Penrith or Parramatta. I'm not sure if Turbo could come out and lead 30-0 against one of those sides like Joey was capable of doing in a grand final. Once again, Turbo's still young. It's scary to think he's 24 years old. He might, if injuries hold out, he might have another decade to go, which is terrifying to think about. But, I mean, all he needs to do is take that next step in the finals, which I'm confident he will. I have no doubt whatsoever that he will. It's just a matter of when. And at the moment, he has got the team around him to be able to do it, in my opinion, with Ches and Foz and these sort of guys, but they're getting older. So, interesting few years. Hopefully when Ches does retire, Turbo is ready to really own those final series.
Do you think
dominate it?
Do you think it's a fair comparison, though? Would you, if you were going to say top 10 most impactful players of all time, would you have, obviously you'd have, your Lockies, your Thurstons, your Fittlers, your Lazarus for sure. Would you have Tommy there, or you still want to see him do in the finals?
No, I would have him in the top 10, I think. I definitely would, but I want to see, mate, at the end of the game, at the end of the day, it's still 15 games. I watched Joey and Freddie do it for 10 years, so I do want to see Turbo own the big stages. That is what will push him into probably that top 5, top 4, top 3 instead of being in the top 10 at the moment where I have him. But I don't think it's an unfair comparison. Yeah,
I mean, to be clear, I'm not saying career-wise. We're just talking about like the 2021 season. His impact on the team. He was a 40-point swing. He was literally a 40-point swing. I just crazy. So, but
once again, though, pending who you're playing.
That's true.
Is what I would say. Pending who you're playing. Once again, I look at Joey. He laid on 30 points in a grand final against one of the best teams we've ever seen. Yeah. So it'd be the equivalent of Turbo doing that to Penrith or Melbourne, which. I'm not as confident of him doing it as I was of Joey doing it realistically.
Do you think that might be a victim of his position though?
Yep, quite possibly.
Because Chez is the one leaving it, whereas like Tommy isn't leading the boys around, whereas obviously Jay was. But I mean, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. You still have to have when you're talking about career, not just like the 1 year. These guys like your Fittlers. Glenn Lazarus is another guy that comes to mind for me that never gets mentioned. He was so impactful. It's crazy when you look at his career. Won the maiden grand final for Storm. Won the maiden grand final for Brisbane Broncos. And won a grand final with the Canberra Raiders. I'm pretty sure at least 2 of them were in his first year at the club. And
yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the first premiership for Canberra too, 89.
Yeah, and so it often gets forgotten that Glenn Lazarus truly was one of the most impactful players because not only did they win the grand final, but the foundation laid for each club for the next 10 years when he was there, they all went on to pretty much dominate at least the next 5 to 6 years, Yeah,
and I think now people look back at the Melbourne one and go, oh, yeah, they're a successful club. Mate, putting a rugby league team in Melbourne, absolute rugby league desert, for them to win a comp in their first 10 years, I think would have been impressive.
Yeah.
For them to do it in year 1, year 2, whatever it was, unbelievable. And it's great. And once again, you just said, is it because of the position Turbo plays? And I would argue, you know what? Fullback's still a pretty influential position. It might not be as much as halfback, but I'll tell you what, it's heaps more than fucking front row. Yeah. And this guy won a premiership everywhere he went. Yep. Wayne Bennett dragged him everywhere he went, and then Chris Anderson looked at him and said, I need him to build this Melbourne side.
Yeah.
He's very underrated in that regard.
I'd probably have him in my top 5 all time, influential players for sure. Yep. I'd probably have him as he would be number 1 most influential forward without a doubt, I'd say. I'd say without a doubt.
I think when you consider the position he played, there could be a fair argument for him being the most influential, considering he wasn't a halfback, he wasn't a fullback. Yeah. I think you could make that argument realistically. I probably wouldn't, but I think there's an argument there.
Yeah, totally. What's crazy is the fact that it's, Tom had such an incredible year. We can even talk about this. I mean, there's no one else that we could really, look at and go, they played so well. But the fact that Manly started so poorly and ended up in the top four, it is just outrageous. So it's always, I love talking about this stuff because it also sometimes you get reminded of, when you go back over other people's careers and you're like, oh, actually, you know what? Like in the finals he did this. Yeah. Like for example, Lockyer, like he was doing this in tight Origin matches. Lockyer would do something to win. Now, speaking of Origin, New South Wales record-breaking Origin win. This was absolutely incredible. It was. Don't get me wrong. I don't think maybe in 1,000 years or 200 years or 100 years we'll see another 8 in a row. Now, I don't think that people that compare this New South Wales side to the 8 in a row, I'm not talking about comparing them as in a squad over a period of time. But if you could take this side in a one-off match against the 8 in a row side, I truly believe it would be the highest quality footy we've ever seen.
Yeah, I think that's a fair shout. I think that a lot of people were trying to compare them just baseline to that 8 in a row, which I thought was absolute horseshit personally.
Insanity.
Yeah, ridiculous. I mean, you consider this same New South Wales side, pretty much the same squad, couple of guys in and out. They lost a series 6 months before this against a Queensland team that probably featured 7 guys that aren't going to play Origin again, realistically, because they had so many injuries. They were down on their knees. So I can't put this team over that 8 in a row. But what you're saying, when you're being specific like that, I think it would be one hell of a matchup. I'd find it hard to bet against that Queensland team. As much as I would love to see New South Wales win, you got 4 Immortals in your spine. You got a GI floating around, Hodjo. Just an incredible side, But this New South Wales side, they are very impressive. That game 1 ended up being played in Townsville, 50-6. 50 points in an Origin game was just unbelievable. Turbo, as I said, he didn't have a position. He was just playing footy. Latrell was absolutely on fire. I think the standout guy for me from this series, obviously we'll talk Turbo, Latrell, they were unreal. And I thought Tariq Sims, I wouldn't have picked him. I'm happy to admit it. I wouldn't have picked him.
I agree.
I wouldn't have even considered him, to be completely honest with you. But, mate, some of the shit that he came up with, there's a play early in game 1 where he gets the ball. New South Wales are getting pummeled in their own end. Turbo takes a hit up, he gets bent backwards. To'o takes a hit up, he gets bent backwards. And Sims takes a hit up and makes about 15 metres. And it flips the narrative completely. And it was in the first few minutes, but they were just rolling after that. I thought the pick of Tariq Sims by Freddie was just so special. He did a similar thing with Daniel Saifidi a few years ago. We all giggled, we all laughed. Sorry, is he a top 3 front row in our game right now? I think he is personally. So I think the Tariq Sims pass that he threw to Brian To'o, an incredible one there. To'o scoring 2 tries on debut. It was unbelievable to have such a shit fight and end up in Townsville. That's the other thing about this Origin series. New South Wales didn't play a game in Sydney.
It's crazy.
They did not play a game in Sydney, and they're arguably the most, I don't think they are, but you could argue that it's the most dominant Origin team you've ever seen. They didn't even get a home game.
Well, look, again, when you compare them, like comparing us 8 in a row is ridiculous. But when you want to bring the specifics down and you go, okay, let's just compare one series or let's just compare one game. I truly believe it's one of the best outfits New South Wales has ever presented. Like when you compare sorry?
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying. I don't think any of the Queensland 8 in a row teams were as dominant as this one.
Yeah.
But I will say I wonder how dominant that Queensland team would be under these rules.
That's a good point. Be very interesting. Very interesting. I just think when the key for me is you've got Nathan Cleary coming into his own, and he's truly, when you look at his career, it is very comparable against the GOATs. Again, he doesn't mean he's going to be the GOAT, but it's very comparable. But when the key for me is when you've got Latrell Mitchell, Tom Trbojevic, and Tedesco in the same side, it does start looking like a team like Inglis, Slater, Hodges, or whoever it was in the other centre position. it's very comparable. You know, when you start looking again, I'm not saying it would be better than Queensland's. I still believe that the Queensland side had so many immortals in it that they would have found a way to win. They would have found a way to win the series. But I do believe it's arguably one of the top sides ever put together by New South Wales for at least just the one-off. Again, the key to a good side, a good Origin side, it's about, can you do it again? Can you do it again? Can you do it the next year? Can you keep those standards up? And that's what made the Queensland side so brilliant, is that every year they continue to do it. Whereas this New South Wales side, they've put together, they've won by a record margin. Now it's about, can they do it again? Can they turn up next year and do the same thing again? So in a one-off game, I do believe it would be one of the highest quality games we've ever seen. But yeah, compared to 8 in a row, it's all about the consistency with those boys. For me personally, I thought it was a real redemption arc for Latrell. I just thought that, you know, the way that he got dropped and, you know, the way it all went down and the huge outroar from all of it, the media, everything, for him to mature up and come back, and just even the way he spoke after the game. He was saying, I'm so lucky to be able to be playing with these boys. It's all about, you know, him just talking. It's all about the other person. It's all about what he can do for the state and for his team. And I just thought it was one of the great redemption arcs and one of the great series. Like him in that first game, he was the one that broke Queensland open. It was his run that was outrageous, that just tore us apart. So it was an incredible win, absolutely incredible. And I think that this team will go down as one of the best assembled for a specific game. We still don't know whether they can continue. But if you're going through a cookbook and you're like, I want to put together all the recipe for greatness, I believe we're looking at the recipe for greatness. Now, just because you've got the recipe doesn't mean you're going to cook the right thing. You know, it doesn't mean you're going to cook the best cake ever. But I tell you what, Brad Fittler, the work he's done behind the scenes over the last 10 to 5 years, they've assembled. They're just like, let's say 8 in a row's up here. They're down here still stirring the pot, still trying to work out what's happening. But I tell you, they've got everything they need. There's no real excuses. If they don't go on to win, you know, the next 3 out of 4 series, or, you know, 4 out of 5, it will be because of errors that they made, in my opinion.
Yeah, fair shout. I also think that there's a lot of guys in this Queensland team that are going to return, that are going to find, but like I think we're scratching the surface of KP still.
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely.
you know, so could be about to do something special potentially as well. So yeah, like New South Wales is stacked with unbelievable players, but Queensland, mate, they're not sitting ducks over there. There is some serious talent coming through that Queensland system. You know, like if Queensland had only won 5 in a row, mate, I've got to tell you, I'd still be nervous if New South Wales are going to be able to match that, because I think people underappreciate how fucking hard it is to be able to win that many series in a row, to win 2 series in a row. Origin history tells us it's incredibly hard. If you don't have a Lewis, a Johns, a Fittler, it is a very, very tough gig to win any series back to back. Can I ask you this, as a Queensland fan supporter, are you more nervous about New South Wales now that Penrith have won a premiership, now that the spine has sort of gone to that next level? See,
that's the thing. I believe New South Wales have all the ingredients to be dominant, but I just don't think they have the same. You know what? Maybe they are missing the one ingredient. So I could be wrong, but I don't think they have the same foundations to utilise those ingredients. And what I mean by that is that Queensland always have a chip on their shoulder. They're the smallest state. You know, rugby league is all about New South Wales. New South Wales have all the teams in it. And so the reason why I have confidence that although New South Wales have the ingredients to be great, they still may drop a series here and there compared to Queensland is because of that. They just don't have that same... Queensland just have a chip on their shoulder that New South Wales just don't have. You just don't have it. And it's a symptom of us being the little brother. It's a symptom of us being kind of like, you know, we don't get respected, and you know, the grand final is always at ANZ. You know, all the little things that we can pull on for example, when we won those 8 in a row, when we got into the 5th and 6th in a row, we weren't pulling on, they beat us last year, or they would have been pulling on things like, man, remember when, in the 80s we had to go and play for New South Wales and all of these little things. So I may have misspoke when I said that New South Wales. I don't know where I stand on it, because I do believe you have all the ingredients. You've got the players. You've got an extremely young squad. That your core is premiership winning now. Your coach is also relatively young, and they all seem to buy in. You've got a great system now set up in New South Wales. So you have all the ingredients, but will you utilise those ingredients the same way Queensland did? I don't know. And I think that Queensland just have a little bit extra to pull on sometimes that New South Wales don't. And I think another example is the series we won 6 months before this one, we were pulling on things that I feel like sometimes New South Wales just don't have access to because they don't have the same chip on their shoulder. Correct me if I'm wrong. Am I wrong? Or
No, mate, I love the way you just spoke for like 4 minutes without really saying anything. And I think that's the beauty of Origin. You can't put it into, like, I knew what you were trying to say the entire time, but nor could I in the sentence before that. You can't put it into words what Queensland are able to do. And the 2020 Origin series sums it up.
Yeah.
Perfectly. Absolutely perfectly. That was an unlosable series that we found a way to lose. We shouldn't have lost. There's no excuses for losing that. And that is, growing up being a New South Wales fan and being, even before the 8 in a row, just being heartbroken every year or two when Queensland seemingly pulls something out of their ass and someone scores a winning try that as a kid, I don't even know who that player is.
Yeah.
It's just Queensland is capable of doing it. And I'm not going to attempt to try and put it into words because I know I can't, but I'm confident that this New South Wales team doesn't go the 8 in a row, the 5 in a row, because I know Queensland will find a way at some point. I know there's too many quality players on the other side of that park that when they get their pants pulled down enough, they're going to stand up. And
put it this way.
Put it this way.
Let's say New South Wales were in Queensland's shoes right now. They had some really good guys coming through, but Queensland had the same cattle that New South Wales have. I would be confident to say that we could probably win 3 to 4 in a row. Queensland, if we had the same cattle, like if we had Tom Trbojevic, Latrell Mitchell, Tedesco, Nathan Cleary, Jerome Law, you know what I mean? If we had that, like I would be confident that Queensland would be able to create an environment that could consistently, and maybe that's because we've already run 8 in a row, so it's very easy for me to say that. There's.
So you were pretty much in this spot in 2006.
Yeah,
you were pretty much in this spot. You had Darren Lockyer, you had a couple of experienced guys that Mal said it's now or never, or you're not coming back. And they won 8 in a row, and then they brought on your Inglis's. These sort of guys that just took it by storm. So once again, I know what you're trying to say, and I agree with you 100%. If the narrative was flipped and it was the other way around, I think New South Wales would struggle to get out of the hole that Queensland are in right now. But I'm confident that Queensland will find a way.
I agree. I think we really will find a way. It's such a conflicting thing because you look at the systems that have been put in place by Freddie, and you look at your squad, and you have to say on paper that you do have the team to do something special. Very rarely do you have the guys that you've got. But yeah, there is something intangible about Queensland that they'll just find a way to. I can't put it into words, but they'll find a way to disrupt something. Whatever it is, they'll disrupt it, disrupt the flow of something in a game, in a series. And to be really, to be frank, we've still got guys like Sam Walker coming through. Kalen Ponga is 23, 24. Cam Munster is still only 27, 28. We got some absolute stars coming through. So it's not dire situation, but there is no denying right now, roster-wise, New South Wales' depth is just out of this world. I mean, you've still got guys like Bradman Best, Zach Lomax, Katoni Staggs, Stephen Crichton. These guys can't get a crack. It's interesting times. I don't know what's going to happen. I think this is my final thoughts on it. New South Wales have the ingredients to do something great. Will they? I'm not sure. I think Queensland have that something special that will disrupt it, though. That's my take on the next few years. If New South Wales go on to win 3 in a row, I won't be super surprised, though. But I do believe Queensland have that special something just to jag a series here and there, just to get that, you know, for example, 2020, just jagged it. And then all of a sudden your streak is broken and it's going to be really interesting. What I do love about it though, Origin is back in a big way. You know, I think there was a period there for 10 to 12 years where a lot of New South Wales fans just checked out and were like, man, fuck this. Like even Queensland fans, I feel like kind of checked out. Whereas like going into this next Origin series, we're at the peak of like, who's going to win? It's just up in the air.
And mate, as much as it kills me to say it as a New South Wales fan, absolutely kills me. To be honest with you, I think that if Cooper Cronk doesn't break his arm in game 1 of 2014,
we win.
It's probably 10 in a row.
Yeah, I truly believe that.
It was 6-0 when he left the field. They lost every moment after that until he came back in game 3 and they won that by 30. Yeah. Once again, just the influence of Cooper Cronk that people underappreciate unbelievably.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I'm super interested. I don't know where my thoughts land on this because there's so many moving pieces. You know, you look at things on paper and you'd go, man, this New South Wales truly can do something special. But then you can never discount this Queensland, you know, intangible thing that Jags wins and Jags series. Now, sorry?
I fucking hate it when you say Queensland thing and it's ridiculous, but I know exactly what you mean.
I apologise for not having the fucking vocabulary to express it, but it's there.
It's like everyone in New South Wales gets it too. We hear you say this and we're just like, you muppets. Like you don't even have a word for it, but it beats us.
Now, number one moment, Panthers win grand final after losing week 1 of the finals, playing 3 tough games against the Eels, Storm and South. Thoughts?
Yeah, mate. 3 grand finals in a row for me. That was the sort of calibre of games that the Panthers had to play. It was funny. I remember the week they played Melbourne. I gave them no hope of winning that. But then in grand final week, I almost gave them no hope of losing the grand final. So I essentially gave them no hope of being there, but then I gave them no hope of losing it, which is a crazy turn of events for them to beat Melbourne in that game. And, you know, I've had people message me over the last few months. Penrith had things go their way, and you know what? Yeah, they did. But you get breaks, and it's how you take advantage of those breaks that you get. And Penrith, they took advantage of each and every one of them. Whether it was, you know, the referees having a short 10 in the grand final, they took advantage of it. South Sydney could have taken advantage of that as well. They had the injuries to the 2 Melbourne Storm middles early. I mean, that's unlucky, but that shit happens. I mean, it is what it is. It's rugby league. Sometimes you're going to get little things go your way. You got to take advantage of them. Penrith did. I thought that grand final was a pretty even playing field. They just played better. They were smarter. They took advantage of what was on offer. And you know, Nathan Cleary's just the standout for me. I was running over his Dally M numbers, and you know, Dally M, it's not an exact science. It's not the best thing to go off. Obviously, I understand that, but mate, the last 2 years, he's scored 30 and 24 Dally M points in 18 games both seasons. So it's 36 games of football for 54 Dally M points. That means that over the last 2 years, he's gone at 1.5 Dally M points per game, which compared to Turbo isn't that impressive. But when Thurston won in 2007 with the most Dally M points ever, he was going at 1.4.
Wow.
So for 2 years, Cleary in regular season has been going better than what Thurston did, and he made 2 grand finals in that time. He won one of them and got a Clive Churchill. So,
wow, it's just
only numbers, but I mean, and yes, Dally M, it is not the exact science, but I mean, it's a fair whack of who's playing decent football.
Yeah, absolutely, and the moment for Ivan Cleary putting the Clive Churchill over his son's head. After everything that he'd been through, you know, making that extremely tough decision to turn his back on the Tigers and go back and coach his son. Even when he got there, they struggled and everyone said it was a bad decision to get rid of Anthony Griffin. How could they do this? Nathan Cleary, you know, the club has invested too much in him. For him to just go, boom, Clive Churchill, premiership, absolutely incredible moment. The Penrith Panthers, I just love what they've brought to the game. They've brought a different energy. There's a different feel about them. They're fresh, they're fun, they're young. I love it. I absolutely love it. And, you know, in the semi-final, I agree with you. I thought Storm would win and win comfortably against the Penrith Panthers. I didn't give them no chance, but the Storm had played so well all season, and the Penrith Panthers just looked a bit shaky. I was thinking against the Rabbitohs, I think they lost a couple of weeks before, and a week before really, and was it the week before? Anyway,
no, they lost to the Bunnies in week 1. They then beat Para. And then they had to play
Storm. Yeah, sorry. They looked shaky against Rabbitohs, and I was just like, I don't think they have it in them to beat a team like the Storm. And for them to gutsily grind that win out, absolutely incredible. I mean, what a year for Penrith. What a year for rugby league in the Western of Sydney. It's been a while since they've had much to celebrate out there, but it's been so good for the game. So good for the game. But that is us for the day, the great guru. We are all done. Top 10 moments done. We will be back next week. Make sure to follow the Guru on Instagram at Rugby League Guru. We've also got Facebook, Rugby League Guru, and podcast Rugby League Guru on all good podcasting apps. Anything else, Guru?
No, mate. Fingers crossed I got a voice next week. You might have done me in here just quietly.
Yeah, apologies for that. But you're such a good bloke. You did it for us anyway. So make sure to grab a case of Bloke in a Bar. Beautiful beer of summer, the beer of sport. I mean, we're going deep into top 10 moments. Tell me another beer that's doing this kind of stuff. I don't see it. I don't see a beer loving sport as much as we. Grab a case of Bloke in a Bar. As usual, I'll go and fuck myself. Thank you.